Chapter 14 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historic Background, Romance of Stitchery and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Scalloped or Petal Rugs. Chapter 14 includes color plate 17, which may be viewed in the online version of the book. Although old-time petal or tongue rugs were negligible floor coverings, they can be very beautiful as made today. One antique petal rug, which is a precedent for the modern ones, was developed in shades of wood brown, intended to portray the seared tones of fallen leaves that in autumn carpet the ground beneath oak trees. The cloth for this very odd and exceptional rug was dyed a soft and mellow brown, typical of these leaves. By using a strong solution of dye for petals to form the outer border rows, and by gradually watering the dye and decreasing the strength for subsequent rows, the gradation of color from the deepest dye to the lightest in the center of the rug was easily obtained. One of the grandchildren tells of this rug lying on the floor before the mantelpiece in the seldom used parlor of the old homestead, and the repeated warnings not to step on it when she was permitted to go in and see the various things treasured in the room. Occasionally, as in this case, some artistic rug maker would instill beauty into her scalloped rug by grading tones of a single color, and the leaf or petal idea is found in such rugs. They supply the rare instances in which the name petal rug was applied, as it is the one most worthy of continuance because of immediately conveying the impression of beauty without any lack of structural significance. It is chosen herewith for use in this chapter. It will be proven especially consistent with present-day developments of this erstwhile odd and uninteresting type into mats of pronounced charm in which design and color unite in ways hitherto unknown in scalloped floor coverings. The scalloped, tongue, or petal rug, by whichever term it is called, derives its name from the shape of the applique motifs. It belongs to the same family as the mosaic rug, the difference consisting in the shapes of the motifs and the way they are assembled, rather than in the manner of construction. It is also closely allied to the applique patchwork rug, for each motif is of fabric appliqued to a foundation. In the petal rug, the foundation is completely hidden by the motifs, while in the applique patchwork, the surface into which they are secured is visible. By whichever name this rug is called, so definite is it that it would seem to restrict the shape of the motifs with like precision, but such is not the case. The contour may actually be that of some classic unit, such as the fish scale or the shell, or it may be in the shape of a fan. Consistency is then disregarded, and the rug still comes under one of the three names given. This does not necessarily mean that those who originally created the rugs were unacquainted with classic motifs, but that in the early days of American settler life, the people chose simple and homely terms of expression. Witness the name washboard mat. Why not fluted or corrugated? Words quite as apt and far more euphonious, though not to the liking of the pioneers. So also were caterpillar braid and caterpillar rugs, terms of their choosing in preference to the more elegant-sounding chenille, which is equally descriptive and accurate. We find the same tendency in the rugs now under discussion. It is true that just as the name was a bit crude, so also were the rugs. The textiles used were uninteresting, likewise the color schemes and combinations. Old-time scalloped rugs have little to recommend them beyond ingenuity and age, characteristics for which they are kept. The faults of the antique mats cannot well be blamed upon the rug makers, who did the best with what they had. Textiles had not reached present-day diversity and color, and the dye pot was seldom resorted to in scalloped rug craft, as there was little need of matching scraps of fabric, and design did not enter into the making. Scalloped rugs were only attempted when the homemaker had a plentiful supply of cloth heavy enough to be adequate. The colors were presumably sufficiently good for floor coverings, since they had been used previously for frocks and suits. It was in the arrangement of colors in contrasting rows or bands, and in the hue of the thread used to finish off edges and secure them to foundations, that any semblance of pattern resulted or flecks of gay shades were introduced. The modern rug illustrated, which employs both design and color, is the work of an artist skilled in the use of pigments and acquainted with classical forms. It demonstrates the suitability of this rug technique to patterns far beyond those found in old scallop mats. In it there is the suggestion of choice, old cloisonné, which fits in admirably with the era when these rugs were first being fashioned. The rug is shown in its harmonious color combination on Plate 17. Sea captains brought back many real art treasures, and among them, pieces of cloisonné from the Far East or from England, where they had landed previously and were purchasable. The furniture of the period showed Chinese influence, especially that of the master craftsman Chippendale. Fabrics for hangings, embroidered shawls, etc., came from the Orient, together with rugs. It is therefore particularly appropriate that this novel petal rug pictured should reflect the Chinese spirit, while preserving the inherent rag rug quality of the craft. By this treatment, it becomes no less well suited to colonial decoration than if it were one of the crude scalloped mats that fail of real beauty. In the rug pictured, an apex of classic design in petal rug formation is reached. It is a criterion of excellence, without presenting any difficulties in making. The rug is developed in felt, and therefore requires no buttonholing to prevent fraying. If other fabrics that necessitate stitchery are chosen, use a dull yellow thread, mercerized, to suggest the metal cloisons. Another thread, matching the color of the textile on which it is used, tacks each petal to the foundation fabric. The diagram shows the shapes of the petal units. It will be found in the back of the book with full directions. A round rose rug is another modern type of petal rug. It is made in graduated shades of any natural rose color. The final rows of the rug that serve as a border for the darkest rose petals should be in green to suggest foliage. The center petals, which may be yellow to indicate stamens, should be somewhat smaller than those in other rows, in order that they may accommodate themselves to the smaller circumferences. This same rug can be carried out in shades of lavender like an aster, or have the petals a trifle narrower and be in any chrysanthemum tones. In all of these guises, it remains a flower petal rug. If it is carried out in a formal instead of a realistic way, it retains the right to the name because of its petal formation. The Chinese influence may continue if the flower represents a peony, one oriental meaning of this posy being wealth. It is possible to develop pond lily rugs with central flowers on the order of those in the chrysanthemum petal rug in cloisonné style, or shades of violet can be blended against a background of mottled green to suggest violets growing on some shady bank. In turning from these rugs that have their inspiration in flowers and leaves to those of more classic style, we find that often the shapes of motifs are varied. In the fish scale rug, the shape links the rug with mosaic floor coverings, though the scales encroach upon one another as in the petal rug. This pattern will be recognized by quilt enthusiasts as the fan design. Whatever the size and shape of a petal rug may be, or the contour of units, the construction is the same. Each consists of a foundation and enough petals to cover it completely, allowing for necessary overlapping. There must be thread either to match the petals or to contrast with them for the ornamental stitchery. The rug should be lined with a stout fabric. Denim is recommended. In olden times, ticking was used, but this does not give as presentable a reverse side to the rug. The binding may be tape, braid, or carpet binding. A coarse sewing thread is needed for the plain sewing. While ticking is not recommended for the rug lining, it has its advantage as a foundation textile for rectangular or square rugs. The blue stripes form gauges for the units in one direction, and it is a simple matter, with a yardstick and a soft pencil, to draw corresponding lines at right angles to these bars for gauges in the opposite direction. Denim is advised for round rugs. It can be marked off for contour and inner gauging circumferences in the same manner as the foundation for the round ravel pile knit rug. The tongue or petal-shaped units should be cut from woolen cloth with a firm body. Cotton or linen is never used for these rugs. The texture is not suitable. Felt is excellent, and such fabrics as broadcloth, ladies' cloth, and other non-fraying textiles. They require no protective stitchery about edges. A textile likely to ravel is buttonholed or blanket stitched. A gold and yellow silk or mercerized crochet cotton, or black, is favored. Whichever is chosen, use it for all edges, except when the stitchery is done in tones matching the colors of textiles, in order that it may be inconspicuous. Units are sewed along the straight edge to the foundation. Use the stout thread for this, and also to tack the foundation and lining together. Take the tacking stitches under the petals where they will not show. Bind the lining and foundation together with braid or carpet binding, and sew with the same thread. Patterns for units should be cut from paper, folded through the middle. Regulation tongue-shaped units should be cut straight across one end and slightly rounded at the other with straight sides. Units may be 3 inches wide when opened out, by 4 1/2 inches long, and from this size down to 2 by 3 inches. Round rugs should have units for center rows smaller than for outer ones, since the circumferences are small around the center. Not more than 2 sizes were ordinarily used in old scalloped mats, but in modern petal rugs there is more freedom in this matter, as well as in shapes and arrangement of units. However the units are disposed, the straight end is never visible, while the curved end is always held flat to the foundation and to the underlying straight unit ends which it conceals, by a single or double cross-stitch taken near the tip. For this, the embroidery silk is used. The foundation may be any desired size that is a multiple of the width of units to be sewed along the edge, for the units meet at edges but do not overlap along their sides. The cutting of units and the embroidery around the edges make good pickup work. All this should be done and the pieces assembled before the units are sewed to the foundation. Commence work by pinning the units from the center of each lengthwise edge towards the corners. Proceed along crosswise edges in the same manner. Finally, put in the corner units diagonally. The outer row of petal units is the first to be sewed to the foundation and should completely encircle it. Each unit should extend sufficiently beyond the edge to form a scalloped border and conceal the foundation. The units are laid on the foundation precisely as shingles are laid on a roof. That is, each row overlaps the units of the row previously put on, forming what is called the drop pattern arrangement, whereby the curved portion comes over the line between motifs, making rows alternate in order. Each motif should overlap those in the preceding row by 1 inch. This allows the straight end of each piece to be completely concealed. In the usual rectangular rug without design, the short, narrow center row has all units placed in a line, with the curved tips turned away from the center, half pointing one way and half the other, while one motif, with curves at each end, fits directly over the middle of the rug. In this way, all straight ends are neatly concealed. In a round rug, the pivotal unit is round. In a rug with a somewhat irregular pattern, the arrangement must be such that the center row is taken care of by the design. The foundation should be on a table when the motifs are sewed to it, and care must be exercised to keep it smooth. When the motifs are all sewed in position and the cross stitches have been taken near their tips as described, line and bind the rug. When rugs take the actual floral formation instead of the cross stitch, 3 straight lines may be done in outline stitch, 2 diverging from the central perpendicular one, to give the effect of veins in leaves. Petal rugs take but little time to make and but a small quantity of textile. Each motif lies flat and covers almost its full surface area of foundation. The only necessary calculating for material beyond that of the completed rug area is for the overlapping inch and the extension beyond the outer edge. There is a minimum amount of stitchery, much of which can be done in odd moments, hence the rapidity of the work. That the rugs can acquire genuine artistry is immediately recognized by a glance at the rug illustrated in Plate 17. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historic Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Quilted Rugs. Chapter 15 includes color plates 18 and 19, which may be viewed in the online version of the book. Part 1. Their History and Background. The quilted rug, like the young phoenix of mythology, rises overnight from the ashes of the past to assume its well-merited place in the realms of rugcraft. It has not lived on air for the same prescribed 500 years, but it has actually been centuries since it had any vogue, notwithstanding its prestige of ancient lineage. By strange coincidence, the first quilted rug that comes to us intact pictures a tree, though one cannot assert that the tree is a palm. The glorious blossoms extending up and down its several branches preclude any such theory, for both the flower and leaf proclaim it to be an acanthus. The delicate traceries of foliage and vine, which form a triple border, are wrought like the design on the field in yellow, green, red, and white. Apparently, this rug, which is a Persian prayer rug, with the gracefully curved niche characteristic of Persian art, holds a place among quilted rugs comparable to that of the famous artabile carpet in Oriental rug lore, since each is apt to be pictured in connection with its special craft, and both are treasured in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. The 2 rugs are of Persian workmanship. About 1925, after the art of quilting had been almost forgotten, insofar as its being pursued was concerned, there came a renaissance. From that time on, people have been fascinated by the possibilities of the craft for decorative purposes. Some of the work being done is reminiscent of the choice quilting of the ancients. Birds and flowers, people and animals, ships in full sail, feathers and fruit, etc., are now wrought in the stitchery of indented lines. It is well at the very start to disabuse our minds of the idea that the purpose of quilting is to ornament quilts. It is true that this name for a coverlet comes from the particular form of stitchery which both embellishes and holds together the several thicknesses of goods. The word quilt is derived from the Latin word colcita, going thence through the Old French to kilt and later to the English quilt, passing from the original meaning of a stuffed cushion or mattress to that of a coverlet in the final terminology. America is the proud possessor of a few antique quilted and embroidered rugs, one of which is pictured. It is from the private collection of Dr. Frank Higgins of Boston, who was so fortunate as to find it while traveling through the Orient. He discovered two in a famous rug bazaar in Constantinople, and this one, being by far the finer, was chosen. He had scarcely left the city when he regretted that he had not secured both of the unique art treasures, but it was too late to get the other. He consoled himself with the belief that during further travels he would be able to pick up another. Though there were many rug marts which lay in his journey's path, no such good fortune awaited him. Such rugs are indeed rare, museums often not having one among their collections of carpets. This particular rug deserves the careful attention of all those who delight in antique rugs and who contemplate following the fashion that prevails for quilting rugs. Not that a rug maker would consider fashioning a prayer rug, which kind this is. A hearth rug or bath mat would be among the adaptations recommended. The shape of the mihrab is distinctly of the Turkish kula type with its straight severity, but the design is definitely Persian. The stitchery itself is, of course, Oriental. The actual stitch unit is somewhat baffling, as it closely resembles what is now called triangular two-sided Turkish stitch. If such it is, the method of working is different. One is inclined to consider it an authentic Persian stitch, which has a close counterpart in Turkish work. For modern embroidery of quilted rugs, the classic chain stitch is simpler and even older. The colors of this quilted rug are a marvelous blending of hues that would at first strike one as somewhat incongruous, but so cleverly are they introduced that the exquisite gradations of tone found in nature are caught and held in meshes of silk. The predominating color of the flowers is a rich madder rose, uninterrupted in the border by any other color except touches of pink near the stem. All stems are in black, which also outlines each frond of foliage, embroidered throughout in the same shade of green. There are flecks of light azure hue in the blossoms. Golden yellow evidently indicates buds, for in the full-blown flower, this yellow is subdued to a shade that would result from a blending of the madder and gold tones in a brownish orange. Before turning from the old to the new quilted rugs, it is interesting to note a few traits of the classic work to help us understand how the craft can be used to perfection today in our rug making. The East Indian quilting is rather more intricate and decidedly more pictorial than that of Persia. No pattern was too minute for the Indian needleworkers to portray with the same faithfulness to detail that a sculptor would evince. Indeed, the time-tinted cast of the centuries-old linen, the smoothness of the textile, with its bas-relief and stitchery, is worthily likened to carved ivory. This is more definitely brought out by the work being handled in tiled portions rather than all-over patterns, an entire surface being divided into blocks, each with its special picture. Galleys manned with oarsmen, rigged ships sailing, kings, warriors, castles, all are depicted on a single piece of linen by no other means than a needle and some bits of soft filling cloth between the top and under linen. Heraldic devices sometimes appeared as if done with an engraver's tool and not a sewing needle. When we turn to the Persian quilting, we find a difference in style, which fortunately lends itself admirably to rug making as we would practice it today. The designs are not in miniature to the same extent as in the East Indian. They are broader in execution, and color is sometimes present. The quilting is put in more as a background to design than as a pattern in itself. And so we may liken Persian quilting to repoussé silkwork, with its raised pattern thrust into relief by means of such stitchery that it is, of itself, a thing of beauty. When the design is embroidered, a wealth of loveliness is presented. Stitchery is lavished upon it, yet with a dignity that indicates reserve. The Quilted Prayer Rug Illustrated bears evidence of this. An adaptation of early Persian quilting of this sort is found in the Quilted India prints. One coverlet comes vividly to mind. The colors in the design are subdued and restful in tone, the needlework varied and intricate, but not too insistent, as its whiteness merges into the body of the fabric, leaving but a faint tracery. Still another variation of quilting is found in the later types in which the running stitch is done in color contrasting with the material. It now becomes a mode of accenting the pattern that does not rely upon lines alone. This calls to mind the old Spanish stitchery known as blackwork. The latter name was applied to it from the fact that it was done in a black medium, like etching embroidery, while the former name referred to the country from which it came. The advent of blackwork into England dates from the time of Henry VIII, for it was his wife, Catherine of Aragon, one of the most famous royal needlewomen, who brought the stitchery of the Moors from Spain when she came from that country to become the queen. More than once in her checkered career, her life hung by as slender a thread as that of the embroidery silk, which history relates was around her neck when she was summoned to one of her many trials in court. While the name of the work seems appropriate in consideration of the somber life of the one who brought it to the palace of the king, the other name, Spanish stitch, is much more felicitous. Since the stitchery was especially the vogue for the decoration of bedrooms, the latter choice is happier. When a vogue calls for black, however, the color seems smart rather than lugubrious, and it is only in looking back on it, when in the midst of an era of gorgeous colorings, that anything peculiar is apparent. Black satin floor cushions are frequently found, and the suitability to the use is considered excellent. So it is that we shall find in quilted rugs that black is a favorite hue for the fabric when satin is employed. In the black satin quilting, however, there is not found the contrast of color characteristic of black work, for the quilting matches the material, while in the Spanish embroidery the etching was in contrast to the linen, the thread being generally gold or yellow. Apart from the black work, the classic color, other than white, is yellow. The reason for the choice of this hue with its shimmer of sunlight is not far to seek. Its likeness to gold is established, and the gorgeous Chinese quiltings that came to England during the reign of King Charles I were actually enriched with threads of gold. Even some of the jeweled gowns of Queen Elizabeth were quilted in gold. So valuable were these threads that in a comparatively short time it became the mercenary fad of fashionable women to drizzle the embroideries, using special tools to pick out the fine gold wires, lest some of the precious metal be lost, and the money gained by selling the gold, so painstakingly collected, diminished. It is unfortunate that so much of the magnificence of old needlecraft has come under the touch of such spoilers, but it helps us to understand the high place of yellow silk, its less costly counterpart, in quilting. The reason for the use of yellow does not hold today, although its beauty in the quilting stitchery remains. The use of black and yellow, however, has set a stamp of approval from ancient days to the present time for the employment of color in the quilting. It can be used in these tones or in a special color to emphasize the scheme of the room for which the rug is made. It is this latter employment of color that is in favor today. It was during the time when King Charles I was at the height of his reign that the Pilgrim Fathers set sail for America, and the wives of those ancestral worthies brought with them recollections, if not actual examples, of the magnificent quilting then so sanctioned by royalty. No qualms of conscience prevented them from introducing like splendor into their embroideries, for the pinch of poverty was active in excluding any taint of worldliness that might have crept into the earliest colonial craft. It was stern necessity that demanded extra coverlets for beds, and the materials were found in old clothing. These, after being pieced together, called for extra thickness to provide warmth, and quilting appeared not as fancy work, but as a competent form of stitchery. The quilts made were often called rugs, just as table covers were called carpets. This is misleading when studying old records to find out what kinds of floor covering were in use. It must be remembered, however, that the words carpet and rug have always had such double significance, since a textile heavy enough to be of service as a covering for a bed was also heavy enough to be used on the floor. Today, we use bed coverings in the same way, as instanced in Navajo blanket rugs. Notwithstanding this duplex meaning, there seems to be no reason to believe that colonial quilts, even though called rugs, had any place among the coverings for the bare and drafty floors. There is an excellent reason for this omission. Quilted rugs are floor coverings that bespeak luxury. They are too exquisite to withstand hard wear, belonging as they do in the Occident more to the cushion than the carpet type of covering. In the East, they can stand the wear of unshod feet, and it is there that they originated. During the period when quilting flourished in genuine beauty in America, rugs as we know them today were struggling for existence. They were utilitarian to the highest degree, stout and sturdy, albeit they were not lacking in a folk art of decided appeal. Meanwhile, in continental Europe and England, the interest was focusing increasingly on rugs from the Orient, all of which went under the encompassing generic name of Turkey carpets. The struggle was to copy them and to make machinery that would weave floor coverings with power looms that would be of approximate worth in the world of textiles. It is not in the province of this present chapter to go more into the details of the difficulties overcome and the competition entailed. They are mentioned merely to indicate the prevailing conditions of this era and to further present reasons why a rug, such as the quilted carpet of luxurious aspect, should have disappeared for so many centuries. In other applications than that of rug craft, quilting was by no means extinct, nor can it ever be, for there is nothing that quite takes its place, even in applied plain sewing. But the art of quilting so far declined during the 19th century that a French needlework book published at that time and of marked excellence entirely omits quilting, while an English embroidery book of similar nature describes it as practiced for utilitarian purposes only. It goes on to say, quote, "The run-line backgrounds so frequently seen in high art crewel work are intended to imitate Oriental quilting, and their designs are frequently taken from old Persian prayer carpets and covers of ceremony." Unquote. This reference to the Persian quilted carpets show their high place in handmade floor coverings. In America, we are indebted chiefly to the mountaineer women of the southern Appalachians, and somewhat to the country folk of the New England states, for keeping alive the genuine art of quilting during this period of abeyance. The work is not of East Indian type, with its maze of needle-etched lines in which the design is laid in cords on a background overlaid with the fine surface linen run down on both sides of the cords. It savors more of the Persian art in which flowers and elaborate geometric patterns are featured. A distinguishing difference found in this country is that the all-over quilting prevails rather than the background stitchery characteristic of the Persian work. Part 2. The craft of the modern quilted rug. Persia and India give precedent for two types of quilted rugs, the prayer rug and the bath mat. As we have seen, it is ill-advised to reproduce prayer rugs. They are too precious and precise in their significance to be bandied about by those to whom the mihrab means nothing. The bath mat remains one of perfect adaptability, and linen, the classic stuff, remains also the best fabric for it, though any stout washable goods may be used. But the modernized quilted rug is not confined in its scope to bath mats alone. It reaches out into the field of fabric floor coverings, in which embroidery and applique are featured. Two other types present themselves for our consideration. Counting the bath mat as one, the second is the cushioned carpet, a rug of luxury on the order of a floor cushion, flat and sumptuous withal, while the third is betwixt these two. It is not for any specific purpose, as is the bath mat, nor is it so thick and soft as the cushion rug. It is in a class by itself, yet akin to both the others. It has the adaptability of the usual handmade rug, in which the textile, the design, and coloring are criterions for correct usage. The materials best suited to the cushioned rug are satin, and its counterparts in decorative materials, in which silk may be cleverly intermixed with linen or cotton to add durability. A high grade of sateen, such as farmer's satin with its remarkable approach to genuine satin in its finish, and glazed chintz in the non-cracking quality, are both excellent. Smart sets are made by having the quilted rug match the down puff in material and in quilting design. Or the coverlet may be an India print, and the cushion rug be identical in design, but in smaller size. The quilting consists of outlining the chief motifs with a running stitch taken through a wadded interlining. Such sets, while they are distinctly East Indian in type, conform to domestic decorative schemes, being well adapted to colonial bedroom treatment, since it was during this era that the importation of articles from India flourished and made a deep impression in period decoration. It will be seen that the quilted cushion rug, like blackwork, is best suited to boudoirs, and especially to bedside rugs, where the downy quality is welcome to bare feet. Nor is it any less acceptable to the knees today than it was to the ancient Persians, who employed quilted rugs for prayer mats. In children's rooms and in nurseries, quilted rugs are felicitous for their soft texture, which, if coupled with applique ornamentation of mother goose characters or animal or bird motifs, delights little folk. The third type of quilted rug calls for material that will stand much harder wear than that used in either the bath mat or the cushioned carpet, since its purpose is that of a scatter rug. Extra heavy linen in ecru or other colors, heavy flannel, felt, suiting in plain shades, etc., may be used, and even so ordinary a fabric as burlap or denim. The ornamentation may be a border and medallion of applique. The field of the rug should be quilted and the outlines of the applique, but no stitchery should be over any part of the pattern. If embroidery is used, it should be entirely in chain stitch, as this is the one used in the Persian antiques of earliest date. Entire motifs can be filled in with this stitchery, as of old. When we come to the actual making of the quilted rug, we find that there are no difficulties of craftsmanship presented even to an amateur. The stitchery is always the ordinary running stitch, taken along the lines prescribed by a pattern. The preparation for the quilting consists of tacking with loose basting stitches, a wadding of soft, fluffy cloth such as outing flannel, canton flannel, eiderdown cloth, cotton or wool wadding, etc., in one or more thicknesses onto a foundation that forms the back of the rug, and again basting over this interlining the fabric for the surface. As quilted rugs are not of large dimensions, the work need not be put in a frame, provided the directions given are carefully followed, and the foundation and each succeeding layer of cloth is kept even and straight. It is necessary to put the layers together on some large table or on the floor when a frame is not used. When once the parts are all basted together, the danger of any portion slipping is overcome. Any ornamentation other than the quilting that is to be on the rug should be done prior to the putting together of the portions. When a frame is used, the quilting is done when the rug is on it. In lieu of a rug frame, curtain stretchers may be used. Another method of preparation for quilting is to baste the interlining to the wrong side of the rug surface, and after the quilting is done, to sew the outer lining portion in place. This method is advisable for scatter rugs, the third group, and for some bath mats. Cushion rugs are done in the first way, for the stitchery should go all the way through the rug. There are many different ways of marking quilting patterns on rugs. The simplest is when the design consists of straight lines. These may be in horizontal and vertical rows forming squares, or be in uncrossed groups of diagonal lines in double or triple groupings, or they may cross and form diamonds, thus making the quaint gamboized quilting. In all of these uses of straight lines, the design can be indicated on most fabrics by folding and pressing the goods before attaching the surface, so marked, to the rest of the rug. Nothing but accuracy in folding and pressing is required to bring out the pattern. A second method which can be followed with all designs, however intricate, is to outline the pattern faintly with pencil on the rug surface, knowing that time and the rub of wear will shortly make the marks invisible. Or the design may be traced over impression paper and thus transferred to the rug. In England, one method mentioned is to have the pattern distinctly outlined on tissue paper basted to the rug surface. The stitching then is done through the paper. Considering the fragility of tissue paper, this method seems precarious. However, transparent papers are to be had that are stronger than ordinary tissue paper. These may be used. Another old-time method that is admirable is to have a zinc mold quilting motif. From this, the pattern can be traced, or the mold itself, which is flat and firm, can be caught to the rug with a few stitches, and then the running outlines be made about it. Frequently, the rug maker, by repeating the motif in different positions, can form designs of genuine grace and beauty. Old zinc quilting motifs are treasured. One, an heirloom owned by the writer, is in itself a thing of beauty, with its patina of age toning the metal artistically. The fact that it served over a century ago to add ornament to many a quilt made in Philadelphia and its environs lends an atmosphere of charm to the quaint pattern, now used as a wall decoration when not pressed into actual service again. In some of the early quilting, the entire design was marked on the wrong side of the work, and the stitchery was done from that side also. It is a method followed in Europe today, and is one to be highly recommended. In rug making, the design goes on the interlining. It may be stamped or marked in any of the ways described. It does not show when the rug is completed. Baste the interlining with the design side uppermost onto the wrong side of the rug. Run the design through both thicknesses of goods. It may be interesting to note in passing that when the ancient quilters used this method of embroidering on the wrong side, They used chain stitch so evenly done that on the right side there appeared unbroken outlines, each stitch exactly meeting the other in the identical needle holes. Expert quilters often make their own quilting designs, using such simple motifs and molds as a saucer or a plate. The round motif is known in historic ornament as the rondelle. When semicircles made with the saucer come in alternating placement in straight rows, a design is made which in historic ornament is known as the fish scale. In colonial parlance, it goes by the name of the shell pattern. Segments of circles, arranged in tiers, form a pattern not unlike an open fan, by which name it is called. All these are excellent quilting designs for rugs, but also more pictorial patterns are appropriate, especially when the indented stitchery forms the sole ornamentation. Birds, flowers, singly or in baskets or vases, ships, and scenes can all be employed as quilting patterns. The feather design is extremely popular, and crests and shields are in high favor. Elaborate designs are not shunned, but sought. The familiar method of snapping chalk designs on quilts is not feasible for quilted rug designs. Distances are short, and it is easier to mark them than to snap them. Stitches should be as fine as the thickness of the work permits. Sewing the lining in last, after the design has been run through the 2 upper layers, allows for finer work than when all layers are quilted together. Corded quilting is considered an up-to-date method of work that has much to recommend it. It is the essence of simplicity with marvelous results. In this, designs are simple and are run each side of the lines of the pattern. A hollow tube is formed between the parallel rows of running stitches taken through 2 thicknesses of fabric. Through these tubes, or spaces between lines, a filling cord is run. Gay cord run between thin materials shows through, giving a fascinating shimmer of color. In rugs, the fabrics are too heavy for tones to be visible, but the quilting thread can be in color. The corded quilting brings out designs in relief most interestingly. The cords cannot form the sole wadding in rugs, as it does in other articles, for floor covering requires a soft padding for the fill design as well as for the tread. Unless a person knows how to do corded quilting, it appears difficult, while in reality it is as easy as running ribbon in lingerie. The under fabric must be of a loose weave. In rugs, burlap is advised, and it is on this that the design is stamped or otherwise marked. A bodkin or ribbon runner is threaded with loosely twisted soft cord, such as comes in dressmaker's supplies, or roving, or candle wicking, etc., in white or natural color. The tip is inserted at edges of work when lines are straight, and the threaded bodkin is pushed through the space between the lines until it emerges at the end of the tube across the rug, if it is a gamboised or checkerboard pattern. Each space between lines is so run until the pattern appears in full relief. If the design is more complicated, as it is apt to be, the bodkin is inserted through interstices in the goods readily made large enough because of the looseness of the weave. Also, it should be inserted at some point where it would be natural for the design to start, and it must follow some definite course indicated by the design. To finish, the bodkin is pushed out through the loosely woven lining, and the cord is clipped close to the work. In the coarse quilting of modern rug craft, it is advisable to use a needle and thread and catch the cord ends to the lining. In fine work, this is not necessary, as the pressure of the quilting is sufficient to hold the cords in place. And it may be in rug making, but by catching the ends, security is assured. When the entire design has been thus run, the rug is ready to be interlined, lined, and finished off. While this up-to-date method has a distinct appeal because of its simplicity, it is not in truth modern. The early Persians used it some. The Indian quilting is a marvel of corded stitchery. The Persians employed a linen sufficiently sheer for running cords of blue to show through and accent the design, done either in chain stitch or running stitch in their favorite embroidery color, yellow. These two tones, yellow and blue, brought out the delicate creamy hue of the linen, creating a symphony in color and stitchery. When the thread used in the running stitches in the modern corded rug is in color, this ancient style is evidenced strikingly. Handsome rug materials lend themselves best to corded quilting. Quilting is so chaste a form of embroidery that it lends dignity to fabrics and charm to designs. In the smart cushion rug, it alone supplies character to beauty of materials. In bath mats, applique is apt to unite with stitchery to complete the decoration. There can be no more appropriate bath mat than the quilted one. It is soft and absorbent, gratifying to the feet, and a sufficient protection for the floor. It washes like a towel. If a simple applique pattern is chosen and the diamond gamboise quilting pattern is used, the rug can be made in a few hours and be distinctive. This is also true of the applique quilted scatter rug. In this, the indented stitchery frequently is more ornamental, but not necessarily harder to do. Each type of quilted rug has individuality. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historic Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Felt floor covering. History and tradition unite in accrediting felt with being the first floor covering of a textile nature made by the Aborigines. From the time of its invention to the present, it has continued to be used in the Far East for rugs. Its value has been recognized in the Western continent, where, since the time of its commercial manufacture, it has been more or less used for carpet surrounds, linings, drugets, etc., and for some minor rugs. In the field of handmade floor coverings, it held a merely nominal place until a recent vogue for felt, coincident with the Renaissance of rugcraft, brought about a renewal of its use in a wide variety of ways. Felt rugs are very quickly made, since they are of a fabric already suited to floor coverings. They are effective decoratively and durable, provided the felt is correctly selected as to process of making and weight of goods. The material never frays, and therefore raw edges can be left without any protective finish whatsoever. Colors can be found to suit any scheme of a room, or to correspond with any necessities of pattern, as the scope and scale of the shades available are almost unlimited. The rugs can be developed in smooth-faced or pile surfaces, and be ornamented with stitchery, patchwork applique, etc. Or the felt can be cut in strips and be used as a flat working medium or for pile strands. But before taking up the actual making of felt rugs, it is wise to know something of the nature of the fabric, what it is, how made, the difference between true and woven felt, etc., in order to select the felt wisely and use it to the best advantage. The name felt is identical with the process of construction, for it is made by the matting down or felting of fibers that have a tendency to curl, or that have what is known as a scale structure, which means an inherent waviness and inclination to fray at the tips. The original method of making felt was to strew the ground beneath a tent or inside a cave, or whatever the habitation was, with strands of hair, chiefly from the camel and goat, with fur, with particles of wool, or with fibers having the felting qualities mentioned. A thin layer was spread at first, and gradually more, when this was trodden underfoot, until it matted together securely, but not worn so smooth that no more particles would adhere. Eventually the ground was carpeted with a textile impervious to water, soft to the tread, and flexible, until its thickness prevented. Felt rugs are made in Persia today by pounding the particles instead of treading on them. Occasionally, a solution of rapeseed oil and water is sprinkled on the goods, then more particles and more pounding. In India, the process of making felt rugs sounds more advanced. The particles are strewn on a mat of rushes bound together with thin cords. This chapar is then rolled and pressed by the feet of natives for hours, during which the rolling and unrolling is continual. At last, the felt is taken out and moistened with soapy water. Then it is stretched on the cheddar until somewhat drier, when patches of colored particles are put on, following some pattern, and the whole goes through the pressing and rolling process again. The finer kinds of felt so made are cut with a mowing knife to make all surfaces even. It is this sort that is used for carpets. Sometimes a rug is made of two pieces sewed together. The thickness of these felts varies from 3/4 inch to 3 inches. It will be seen by these accounts that it is quite within the bounds of possibility for anyone to make the textile of a felt mat, as well as to ornament it. No one, however, in this age would consider doing so, unless in dire need of a floor covering when cut off from access to stores, yet being where wool shearings were plentiful. Then the primitive method could be used successfully. Such a necessity and such circumstances might present themselves in some camp or mining district. There is a myth, chimerical but entirely inaccurate, that accounts for the origin of felt. Once a monk, footsore during a long, hot journey through a sheep-grazing country, picked up a tiny tuft of wool and stuffed it into the heel of his shoe. This eased the chafing, and repeatedly when needed he put more wool particles into his shoe. When reaching his destination, he found to his amazement that the pressure, combined with the moisture, had made the particles firmly adhere to one another to form felt, a new fabric. It is strange that any credence should be given such a tale, for long before shoes were made, even of the crudest sort, felt was an old product. In fact, it is probable that felt was used for the making of some of the earliest footwear, just as it was used for outer garments, hats, armor, covers for tents, rugs, etc. Today, the manufacturing of felt is shorn of all picturesque elements, but many practical ones are introduced to add durability, such as crossing the filmy sheets of particles in opposite directions in the process of building up the fabric under moist pressure, in true felt, also called fiber felt. In impregnated felt, other agents are actually added, giving name to the product, such as iron impregnated felt, etc. When weaving is part of the manufacture, the textile is technically known as thread structure felt to distinguish it from true felt. Both of these felts are used in rug craft. The advantage of woven or thread structure felt for floor coverings is that it better withstands the grinding pressure of boot heels. Both it and true felt grow stronger under steady pounding or direct weight, but neither can well outlast a rotary or frictional pressure, the true felt least of all. It must be remembered that in the Orient, rugs were never expected to have such hard usage. They were and continue to be stepped upon with bare or sandaled feet only. In modern homes, rugs have severe tests, for they must keep their beauty under the shuffling of stout shoes, the weight of furniture, and the constant shifting of chairs. The desirability of using woven felt is, therefore, apparent, particularly when handsome embroidered felt rugs of the Oriental sort are made. Two drawbacks immediately present themselves, however. One is the cost of this felt, and the other is that it comes in but few colors. Both may be overcome. Woven felt is used in paper factories and sometimes may be purchased when discarded and at trifling cost. When cleansed and in good condition, it serves the purpose of foundations excellently. The lightweight woven felts can be bought in white and dyed to order or in the family dye pot. Notwithstanding the advantages quoted in woven felt, the fact remains that true felt is the kind commonly used in rug craft. It is easy to get, comes in a wide range of colors, and costs little. In truth, the rugs cost nothing except the foundation material if discarded felt hats and other felt articles are cut into motifs and employed for decorative applique. Thrift suggests this method as practical, without interfering with the beauty of the rug. A high grade of either woven or true felt is not essential to rug craft. The matter of importance is that the foundation felt be thick and substantial. The lightweight woven felts are not unlike heavy flannel or old-time ladies' cloth, a variety of broadcloth that is not so rich. Billiard cloth is the highest grade of woven felt, not very heavy, but very expensive. No one would consider using such a costly fabric unless some good pieces were found in an old billiard table cover. Light or medium weight felts should be chosen for applique, while heavy felts should form foundations. These should be at least 1/4 inch thick. They are not difficult to procure, for true and woven felts are regularly made in extra heavy weights, up to 1, 2, and even 3 inches of thickness. Felt rugs that are embroidered hold highest rank. The inspiration for these is found in the Numda rugs from India, in which the embroidery has the charm of antique Persian and Indian stitchery. The genuine Numda rugs were imported from the Orient about the year 1924. Previous to that time, as far as has been found, the only felt rugs imported were unornamented and in flat tones, chiefly gray, white, and buff, with occasional small ones in black. The main use for the larger rugs was to go over handsome carpets in dining rooms and living rooms, and for chamber rugs. Domestic printed felt rugs were also used for under-the-table drugets in dining rooms and in other main rooms. This protective use is quite different from that prevalent in the Orient, where the felt is never laid over carpets but under choice rugs to soften the tread on them and to form a neutral background to further enhance the exquisite nature of these handmade floor coverings. Travelers who have lived in the Far East recommend this use of felt in other parts of the world, for they realize the deterioration that results from using fine rugs on bare floors. Fortunately, felt rugs call for no such protection, as it is pressure against a firm foundation that aids the continued felting process of the fabric. If the grinding, rotary, and frictional pressure could be eliminated, felt rugs would wear like iron. Although the name of India is always given to Numda rugs, patterns on them are distinctly Persian, in graceful vine, leaf, and floral designs in which birds are frequently introduced. The tree of life is a favorite. Borders are conspicuous by their absence. Edges are scraggy and so uneven that the shape of a rug sometimes resembles that of a tiger skin shorn of claws and head. The edges dwindle to nothing, while centers of rugs are thick. The size of a Numda rug is never large, at least those imported to the United States. Neither are the rugs as small as doormats, more nearly approximating good-sized hearth or large prayer rugs. The embroidery is invariably in chain stitch. From this consideration of genuine Numda rugs, it is easy to realize what are the requisites for Western homecraft replicas. The felt, preferably woven, though not necessarily so, should be heavy and in the rough, pebbly finish. White, gray, and black are the colors always available in extra heavy weights, and buff may be. All these colors are correct, but it is unwise to select black, for in felt this hue is not a fast color. If the color runs, it will ruin the beauty of the colored stitchery, and much depends on the choice of colors for the embroidery. They must suit the type of design and have the tones peculiar to Oriental stitchery, as found in rugs, cashmere shawls, etc. Shapes may be rectangular. Many of the Numda rugs for foreign export are now so made. Or they may approximate the contours of those already referred to, thereby gaining an added Oriental influence. The edges may be made rough and irregular by tearing the felt apart after it has been moistened, giving a finish which might be termed décollage. A coarse metal comb may be used to aid in tapering the textile and to further roughen the edges. Or the edges may be slashed every quarter inch to the depth of 2 or 2½ inches for a coarse, short fringe. The cost of foundation felt, which in this style of rug is the chief expense, can be decidedly diminished if, when buying it, calculation is made for 2 or 3 rugs, the width of the felt measuring off into at least 2 rug lengths, in which case a comparatively small quantity is needed. If the width is divided into 3 rug portions, one length of goods will make 3 rugs, all of which may be different in decoration. If a tree of life pattern is chosen, it can be copied crudely from another Numda rug or from any Oriental rug of such design. It is well to remember that all trees in historic ornament, however conventionalized, when used in stitchery, are forms of the tree of life. The kind to select for the chain stitch embroidery of Numda rugs should not actually be conventionalized, but have some naturalistic trend, according to Persian art. Do not attempt to make an elaborate design, nor be afraid of its being crude. Numda rugs are crude themselves. If preferred, bold floral designs may be transferred to the felt and be worked in the chain stitch. The open flowers, leaves, and buds should be joined by gracefully curving lines to indicate stems, even though there is no actual semblance of plant or vine in the pattern. These stems are not only effective in the stitch, but are typically Persian. The floral and foliage motifs should be arranged artistically on the felt, but need have no preconceived pattern design. For the stitchery, use a very coarse crewel needle, or if the felt is very thick, use a fir needle. This is triangular and cuts the goods easily, instead of resisting it as a round needle does. Wool yarn of the tapestry or crewel variety is right for the embroidery. The latter is better and comes in fine shades for Oriental stitchery. It is not necessary to have a coarse medium, for chain stitch makes a curved double line and therefore broadens the outlines worked. By examining the rug pictured, which is a genuine India Numda, it will be discovered that some of the motifs are filled in by series of rows of chain stitching. This particular rug was selected for illustration because of its adaptability to homecraft rugs. It also is typical of the colors used in foundation and embroidery yarns. The felt rugs that come next in rank to these embroidered in Numda style are developed in applique, commonly called patchwork. These have been described in the latter part of the chapter, Old Patchwork for New Rugs. One essential to be stressed, apart from the artistic element that must exist if the rugs are to be worthwhile, is the choice of a grade of felt for the foundation that will have weight enough to lie flat and remain firmly set on the floor. It may be added that the Numda style of ornamentation can be carried out by substituting applique for the larger motifs and using chain stitch for stem work, which in this case should be heavy enough to correspond with the more substantial motifs. As applique was often used in old embroideries to simplify work, it is consistent to use it in these rugs, though they cannot be expected to have the same handsome character as when done in chain stitch. Mosaic rugs can also be developed excellently in felt, as was suggested in the chapter entitled Fabric Mosaic. In short, felt can be used to good advantage in all rug work in which a non-fraying textile is desirable, since the edges do not have to be finished in any way. Felt strip rugs are usual, but unless the strips are of heavyweight felt, they offer insufficient body for good floor coverings. These rugs are made precisely as is the simplified weaving taught in schools. To ensure evenness, the warp strips should be thumbtacked to a board or to a hooked rug frame, each strand touching those next it. The weft of shorter length strips is interlaced through this warp. Any artistry that can be instilled into these mats comes through color combinations. If the first and last 4 warp strips, or more if the rug is sizable, are of black or some dark color, and an equal number of similar weft strips are woven at the beginning and end of the mat, a border effect is gained. Corners will be squares in flat color, while in distances between, the shades of the field strips will appear in the border in checkerboard regularity. All the strips should be of the same width, the warp strips being in color throughout the field. These may all be one tone and match the weft, making a one-toned field throughout, or the weft strands may be in contrast to the warp, supplying a checkerboard field. A heterogeneous array of colors in the field is inartistic. Fancy weaves may be introduced inconspicuously by skipping 2 strands when weaving, and so arranging the spacing in consecutive rows that a diagonal pattern results. Not more than 2 strands should be skipped, and these should never come over the same warp strands in consecutive rows, for this weakens the rug. These felt woven rugs have a narrow fringe along all sides. It is made by leaving about 3 inches of warp and weft unwoven. To secure the edges firmly, a cross stitch to match the strands, or in contrast to them, is made in the center of each checkerboard square around the rug. Similar stitches may be put in each square or on special colored squares only. Black or yellow is a favorite hue for this stitchery. Tips of strands may be cut in fishtails or left straight. To cut the former, double each strand and snip a short diagonal sliver from center to tip. Unfold, and the fishtail shape results. Variety can be afforded these rugs when they have self-toned centers, or are in 2 tones or colors only. Cut flat flowers from felt and scatter them over the rug field singly, or in 2s and 3s. An occasional green felt leaf will provide diversity to the gay blossoms. A touch of artistry can thus be instilled into these rugs. When the shades of the rug accord with the color scheme of a room, the rug fits well into the decoration. An entirely different style of rug is found in those made with a pile. In these, owing to the width of pile strands, it is not easy to carry out patterns, though design is a pronounced trait in other pile rugs. A neutral field made by clever distribution of hit or miss colors with a border in solid dark tone can be pleasing, or colors in the field can be in masses, harmoniously contrasting. These may be separated by narrow lines of black, like the lead in stained glass windows. Felt pile rugs are among the most thrifty of all floor coverings, for in them any scrap of felt as big as 1 inch by 3/8 inch can be employed. Use ticking for a foundation, and sew each bit of felt cut this size onto it by doubling through the center and securing with a few well-set stitches. Use the strips as gauge lines to ensure evenness of pile. A simpler method, that is not strictly craftsmanlike, is to sew the bits to the foundation by machine. Put the ticking under the feed and place the crosswise center of each strip on one of the ticking lines, following either the blue or the white stripe down the entire length of the rug. No basting is necessary, for each bit of felt can be held close to the one last sewed, having its position always as described. Fold the felt ends back over the stitching when sewing the second and each successive row so that the stripe of the ticking is bared for the stitching. Rows should be about 3/8 inch apart so that the pile will stand up well. One entirely handmade felt pile rug so fashioned has stood the test of 75 years of constant wear and is still in perfect condition. Each year it grows more attractive as the colors take the tones that time alone can supply. One type of pen wiper rug has a curious pile, best developed in felt, although any woolen bits may be used, preferably those that do not fray easily. It is the only rug that well deserves its descriptive name, although, as has been found in the chapter on patchwork applique rugs, others are so-called or miscalled. In this pile pen wiper rug, the formation is precisely that of some pen wipers, and a section of the rug could be removed and be transformed into pen wipers at any time. There are 2 ways of making the rug from the same unit formation, which is merely a small circle. Since a coin, a spool, or button makes a correct pattern, the rug would come under such a classification, were it not of such entirely different type. The pattern mold is the only thing in common, and this is comparatively small, 1 inch in diameter being a good size for the circle. A quarter or shilling is the right proportion, or a spool for A silk or 40 cotton. Any wisp of woolen goods from which even a single circle 1 inch wide can be cut can go into the making of the pile pen wiper rug. Here again, ticking, with stripes spaced so that they form gauges on which to sew the circles, should be used for a foundation or any firm fabric with lines so spaced. The simplest method of constructing the mats is to fold each circle twice through the center, making a segment 1/4 the size of the circle. Sew each segment to the foundation by 2 or 3 stitches taken through the point, center, of the segment and the foundation textile. Some rug makers sew through the folded segment and then allow the folds to open as they will, while other workers prefer not to fold the circle, but to take the stitches directly through the center of the flat circle. In the latter instance, the edges of the circle are caught with the fingers and thumb and drawn upright after being stitched in place, without any attempt at regular folding. In this method of construction, the pile forms wee tufts with the edges of circles all of an even height. Each tuft must be sewed sufficiently close to the preceding one to make the edges remain upright, supplying a firm, even, and substantial pile. Rows should be so spaced that the distance between them is equal to that between tufts in the row, for so only will the tufts be equally distant from each other. These pen wiper rugs with tufted pile are the earliest type. The hit or miss pattern prevailed, although it is quite within the range of the construction to include interesting designs, as will be seen from the account of the second method of making the rugs. In each method, pattern is similarly introduced. The second method of making these quaint rugs gives a corded appearance to the pile surface that is distinctly different from the tufted pile. Fold each circle as described, i.e., through the center to form a half circle, and then this half circle through the center to get the quarter segment. String these segments together through the double folded edge, having one stout thread come near the center tip and one near the outer or circumference edge. If the rug is small in size, these two stout threads may be the length or the width of the rug, according to the direction given the corded effect. When rugs are long, the danger of having long threads break is eliminated by using shorter ones. When this is the case, the break in the cord of segments must be overcome by joining the segments at the end of one and the beginning of another string. Do this sewing after the two strings have been positioned on the foundation. It is necessary, in making the corded pen wiper rug, to have the stripes in the ticking or other firm striped foundation so spaced that distances between stripes measure 1/2 inch, or whatever the half diameter of the circles may be. Otherwise, the stripes are of little value as gauges. To sew the strings of segments to the foundation, take a stitch through the tip of each segment first. Then run the needle between the fold last made in the circle and catch the two thicknesses of cloth to the foundation with a stitch or two near the circumference edge. The thread will make a long stitch between the folds, while two short ones will be taken at both the tip and near the edge. Segments are sewed consecutively onto the foundation. The thickness of the fabrics from which they are cut determines their spacing. In heavy cloth, one segment will occupy about 1/2 inch in width, as well as in length, but if the textile is thin, two at least will be required to make the width equal the length. Each row of segments must just touch the other to keep the undulating corded appearance. If they are closer, the pile pushes up and resembles the tufted pile. It is essential to keep the rows geometrically straight and precise, for unless the rows are perfectly parallel, the beauty of the rug is impaired. By having the foundation marked off, as in ticking, it is not at all difficult to keep this symmetry. This very precision is an aid in making patterned pen wiper rugs in corded or tufted style. When each segment occupies the space of a square, as it is likely to in either style, the copying of cross-stitch patterns is as easy as if the work were on canvas. Filet and beadwork patterns can be copied with equal facility. Geometric patterns found in weaving, in knot-tied and smooth-faced rugs can be done by counted stitches. These patterns will be greatly enlarged owing to the size of the tufts. Hooked rug patterns can be used, although there is a freedom of technique permissible in them that must now be transposed into precision. The tufted pile lends itself more readily to design than does the corded pile, for each tuft is sewed in place separately. Thus, for instance, a pattern may be drawn on a foundation and tufts sewed on, regardless of the row formation, but following the design, and then the background filled in. When the cord pile is used, the segments must be strung in sequence and rows numbered, each row corresponding to a line of filet, cross-stitch, or weave. It is advisable to sew corded strips onto the foundation as they are completed when designs are carried out. It is then a simple matter to correct any fault in the stringing of colors, and the work can be kept true. A width of border should be sewed on first, and each row be begun and ended with a corresponding width of the same color. An equal width of border must be sewed on to complete the surround. The segments will naturally spread sufficiently to fall over the edges of a foundation. The one exception to this may be in the final row in the cord pile. To avoid any discrepancies, omit the thread near the circumference in this row and catch each alternate segment to the edge of the rug foundation, which has previously been turned in. As the stitches come through the foundation and may wear unless protected, these rugs should be lined. Denim is recommended. It is strong and good-looking. These pen wiper rugs in either style are easy to make and vie with the strip pile rugs in thrift. The rugs wear well and, as has been seen, may be as ornamental as a hooked rug and as attractive in pattern as a cross-stitch or needlepoint floor covering. They are soft to the tread and therefore are delightful for bedroom floors. When carried out in rich tones, they are equally appropriate for the main rooms of an informally decorated house, a cottage or farmhouse, though especially well suited to old-fashioned homes. Surprising diversity can be instilled into felt rugs, whether smooth-faced or pile. While some of them described can be developed in other materials, all of them are seen to advantage when felt is the medium. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historic Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Old Patchwork for New Rugs. Patchwork rugs are plebeian floor coverings of patrician ancestry. In this, they are like the quilted rug, though quilting is not employed in patchwork rugs. Moreover, it is difficult to realize that the quaint and crude piecework and pen wiper rugs of early colonial days in America and the marvelous applique rugs that are in museums among the treasures of past centuries can belong in the same category. Yet each is a patchwork rug in the modern acceptation. Not only has the word become flexible, but the work also. To one familiar with needlecraft, the term patchwork is one to conjure up a vision, the gorgeous opus consutum of bygone days with all its wealth of beauty is called to mind. So lavish was this cutwork applique in the heyday of the art that not only were the foundation and overlaid fabrics of the finest, but precious stones and mother-of-pearl were inwrought, and strands of genuine gold and silver shone among the silken threads of the embroidery. It is interesting to note the evolution of patchwork from its natural primitive origin to this pinnacle of perfection, and see how admirably it adapts itself to each requirement, even to rug making. Archaeologists believe that in the first instance, patchwork was the substitution of pieces of cloth in the place of bold splashes of paint or stain to form ornamental motifs and designs on a fabric foundation of contrasting color. It is a natural process of transition. Certain it is that the earliest fragments of decorative materials extant have among them examples of patchwork dating back to the time of King Solomon, 10th century BC, and it is considered uncertain whether the carving that shows an Assyrian carpet, 705 BC, pictures an embroidered carpet or one ornamented with patchwork. From these past ages to the present time, patchwork applique has been prominent in needlecraft. A remarkable record this, showing less fluctuation in fashions than is commonly accorded to any one special type of work. There are periods when the opus consutum, united with exquisite stitchery, was magnificent. Such an era was during the 15th century, when needlework pictures rose to such a height that Botticelli was not averse to being attributed with the invention of decommesso, as it was then termed in Italy. But Vasari, who was responsible for such accrediting, could not have been as learned in needle art as in painting to have been unaware of the inception and rise of the embroidery that in his day was literally a vision of delight. The people of India, whose needlework of the remote past has won the admiration of the world, employed from the first both the inlay and onlay patchwork. So cleverly are these done that they frequently appear to be part of the weave of the foundation itself. No patience was too great to exert to bring beauty from this work, and no limit was put on the monetary outlay necessitated. And so we find that patchwork is not a matter of threads and patches, but of artistic appliqué that has come down to us through the ages. When it is used in rugs, it should reflect some of the inherent fine qualities. Delicate work is not called for. In fact, it is not correct on floor coverings. It is boldness of design and boldness of treatment that suit rug craft, but these can reflect the spirit of ancient patchwork when appliqué motifs are employed. One of the advantages of patchwork appliqué in rug craft is the rapidity with which the work can be done. A single bit of colored cloth applied to the foundation gives the effect of innumerable stitches. As a matter of fact, it was for this reason that appliqué was used in the Middle Ages, and it is as welcome today as then. It is divided into 3 types: onlay, or true appliqué; inlay, a fitted or mosaic appliqué; and piecework, a name fast becoming obsolete in connection with patchwork, but which is perfect in its description, for pieces of material are sewed together to form a smooth, unbroken surface. One piece is not fitted into a space cut to conform in a foundation fabric, as is the case in inlay appliqué patchwork, but edges are joined or pieced together to form squares, diamonds, or more complicated patterns. All of these kinds of patchwork are employed in modern rugs, but the onlay, or true appliqué, is the favorite. Felt is the fabric that lends itself best to appliqué patchwork, as it comes in very heavy weights suitable for foundations, and in lighter grades in a wide variety of colors which work out admirably for the cutout motifs. It is a great mistake to employ lightweight felt for foundations. Felts are being put on the market for rug craft that are so light and soft that they cannot prove satisfactory. They are flimsy for floor covering, which to be practical must lie flat and smooth on the floor without being easily kicked up. Heavy cloakings and suitings are also excellent for foundations. For motifs, any closely woven fabric that does not fray is suitable. Felt fulfills this requirement to perfection. It must be remembered, however, that felt does not withstand the scuffing of feet or any friction that breaks the surface. It grows tougher and firmer by pressure, not by friction. There does come a woven felt that is extremely durable and is obtainable in many weights. It may even be several inches thick, like true felt. The woven goods is a warp and weft textile that is also felted. It is, of course, more expensive to buy new than is the true felt, but it is used in paper factories, from which it is often possible to buy it after having been discarded there. It will be far from its pristine color, but it can be cleansed or dyed. With this for the foundation, and lighter weight felt for motifs, the cost of the rug is minimized. Or if the rug maker has heavy cloth for the foundation and pieces of non-fraying material that can be cut into motifs, the rug costs nothing but the labor of putting it together. Designs should not be so simple that they at once proclaim the fact of little work. I have seen a few circles of cloth and a leaf or two in one corner of a felt rug considered ample ornamentation. Since the work is extremely rapid, such paucity of decoration is not commendable any more than it is sufficient. An attractive rug, however, can be made from a piece of material 27 by 36 inches. Blanket stitch a band 1 1/2 inches wide in black or some very dark non-fraying fabric about the foundation edge, having the band onlayed. Blanket stitch the inner edge and bind the outer one with black braid. 5 inches above this edge, onlay another similar narrow band and blanket stitch both edges to the foundation. The center, 19 by 28 inches, is left unornamented, while the 5-inch border has motifs appliqued to it. These are secured to the foundation with blanket stitches and can be joined when necessary with 1/2 inch felt stem work in curves or straight lines as the pattern demands. These also are secured by blanket stitches along each edge, or they may be worked over in herringbone stitch. If preferred, chain stitch may form the stems. A strong, coarse yarn should be used. A design that immediately suggests itself as appropriate and dignified is a conventionalized lotus and leaf, since it is in Egypt that patchwork is reputed to have originated. As such a design has the desired simplicity and lends itself to quick work, it is admirable. However, any desired design that will fit into the 5-inch border space can be used. A design from old Sind pottery called the Knop and Flower is classic and adaptable. A Persian border design, with its graceful curves of stems encircling full-blown flowers, while buds and leaves sprout from the vine, is another with dignity and ease of workmanship. The flowers may be discs of color with indented edges, having stamens and pistils represented by smaller central discs of contrasting color. Centers may form a second layer of applique, as in the old-time button rug, or the larger discs may have the smaller ones set down into it in inlay applique. In this case, the larger disc is but a wide ring from which a portion, the size of the center disc, has been cut. This is an economical method, as it leaves the inner disc cut from the ring to be used for other applique. Care must be exercised in cutting rings and centers, for the two parts must fit precisely. Join portions after fitting together with herringbone stitch, taken through the rug interlining, or through a piece of cotton cloth on which the ring is basted, preparatory to the inlay work. A rug field may be ornamented with applique patchwork as well as borders, but there should always be a well-defined line marking off the border, unless it is of inlay or onlay of a contrasting hue. Felt patchwork rugs are apt to be unlined and edges left raw. If a lightweight felt is used, lining will give it the necessary body. Edges then are bound. Rugs made of cloth other than felt may be bound, or have the lining turned in and felled over the turned-back hem of the rug. Patchwork rugs lend themselves well to interior decoration, for not only can wanted colors be included, but even designs from decorative fabrics. One of the more recent forms of patchwork applique, dating back 250 years, called broderie percée, employed motifs cut from cretonne or other decorative textiles. In rug craft, cretonne would be appropriate on linen or denim for summer cottages if the designs were suitable in character and the rug were lined to give the correct body. Motifs from heavier fabrics, such as brocades, tapestries, etc., could be used on wool foundations. The ancient method of cutting designs for patchwork applique can be followed as successfully today as in the olden times. Sir George Birdwood tells in his book, The Industrial Arts of India, how it was and still is done, for it is practiced everywhere among the artistic peasantry of Europe. In describing the centuries-old work, he says, quote, "They, the women, probably embroidered on cut patterns and worked the larger patterns in applique into their work. And they cut the patterns by folding the cloth double, so as by one undulating or zigzag cut to get a two-sided symmetrical pattern. The method of cutting out patterns in this way tends to perpetuate a symmetrical and rectangular representation of ornament." Unquote. There are innumerable patterns of worth made in this way, some of them marvelous in their intricacy. It is a fascinating way to make our own pattern motifs. One rug pattern illustrated is the knop and flower design, reproduced from ancient Sind pottery and found on textiles also. It is classic and lends itself admirably to patchwork rug making. One tree of life motif for the field of a rug is fantastic and fascinating. It can be developed in any colors, the shape being the matter of importance. It is when rug motifs have a background of significance that they become interesting, and all historic ornament has this charm. Modern rug makers can instill this delightful quality into their rugs by employing old motifs, or by following their lead when cutting out their own design motifs. Bizarre decoration is transient in appeal, but the classic gains by repetition. This thought should be held in mind, not alone in connection with patchwork rug motifs, but patterns for all rugs in whatever special form of craft they may be made. The quaint pen wiper rugs of colonial days combined piecework with applique patchwork, but unfortunately they seldom have any genuine artistic appeal. Indeed, it is amazing how few patchwork rugs fashioned in the rug-making epoch of the late 18th and the early 19th centuries have artistic merit. The most usual pattern was of squares of fabric bound with braid and sewed together to form a rug surface. In each square, or in alternate squares, some cut-out motif, such as a leaf, a circle, or a flower form of contrasting cloth, would be appliqued. Evidently, the old colonial rug makers thought slightingly of patchwork rugs. To rectify such a mistake in judgment, one has but to study the records of ancient work, a glimpse of which has been given. The name of thought work was ascribed to the Armenian patchwork in which folklore was depicted. It is for the modern rug maker to raise the standard of patchwork in rugcraft, rather than to copy types lacking artistry. Fortunately, the vogue of patchwork rugs is here, and the opportunity is present. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Embroidered Carpets and Rugs in Darned Stitchery. Chapter 18 includes color plates 20 and 21, which may be viewed in the online version of the book. Embroidered carpets have from the first held a high place in ornamented textiles. According to Sir George Birdwood, it would appear that carpets originated in embroidery, and that carpets were first used, like embroideries, for hangings, etc. As practically all homecraft rugs are dependent upon stitchery in one form or another for their development, it will be seen that the term embroidered rugs is too inclusive for any satisfactory and helpful results to be gained from their study unless the subject is subdivided. Some of the divisions result in creating distinctions in handicrafts such as are found in knitting, crocheting, quilting, while others, coming more strictly under the term of embroidery, as differentiated from stitchery, are dependent upon divisions in the technique of ornamental sewing. These finer points of discrimination are necessary in rug craft, which must be closely studied for methods of work and the application of the embroideries. Hence, the chapters on cross-stitch, canvas woven, tapestry, etc., apart from embroidery restricted to a special style of rug. Under the heading of this chapter, those rugs only will be considered in which the embroidery is an incident of decoration and not an actual method of construction, and in which the stitchery does not encroach upon any special type of rug elsewhere treated. The classification followed is one in common use. It signifies rugs in which the embroidery is seen in traceries of pattern and in solid stitchery worked upon a textile, which may form a visible foundation background elsewhere. Just what the stitches were in the prehistoric carpets referred to by Sir George Birdwood, and how they ornamented the carpets, has not yet been discovered, but sufficient knowledge has been gained for two distinct types of stitches to assert themselves. Which of the two preceded the other in stitchery sequence is not determined. One is tent and double tent, called cross-stitch, dependent upon the weave for the construction of the embroidery on counted threads, built up as it is on the precision of warp and weft. The other is chain stitch, dependent upon the primitive needle whereby all embroidery was done, and which tool had a crook instead of an eye. Chain stitch is therefore unfettered by the structure of the woven textile, though this is frequently made use of to great advantage. The two stitches are so entirely opposite in type and structure that one could not have evolved from the other. The problem then remains whether the textile or the tool was responsible for prehistoric embroidered rugs. The stitches would appear to have sprung into existence almost simultaneously. Cross-stitch, which gives an extra durability to an entire foundation, has this in its favor in the realm of floor coverings. Chain stitch, its rival, can but ornament, though when so doing it can be used as running stitch to secure other thicknesses of fabric to the underside of the surface textile, as in quilted rugs. Both cross-stitch and quilted rugs are recognized types of such importance in rug craft that separate chapters are devoted to them, but this does not preclude the use of each stitch in rugs that come under the name of embroidered carpets. Besides cross-stitch and chain stitch, darned embroidery, which too has historic background, is now popular in rug craft. There are also many other stitches, flat, effective, and suitable, that are at the command of the rug maker for her embroidered carpets. Stout linen was used for embroidered rug foundations by the Persians and East Indians in their warmer climates, but heavy homespun in weights known as blanketing was favored by American settlers in their colder section of the globe. Today, felt takes the place of blanketing. While it is not nearly so congenial to the needle, it can be had in weights suitable for rug making. No other should be used, lest the sort of rug facetiously described as a follow-up rug result, one which refuses to lie flat and slides along the floor as it is stepped onto or off of. Neither felt nor blanketing resists the grinding wear of heels, though each mats or felts well under pressure. The importation of India Numda rugs, with their smart oriental stitchery, has given an impetus to this type of embroidered handicraft rug. Chain stitch is employed. The firmness of the fabric does away with the need of any frame. As these rugs are described fully in the chapter on felt rugs, though they are distinctly embroidered floor coverings of the type coming under the classification of this chapter, they will not be described more fully here. Under the chapter on patchwork, another type of felt embroidered rugs will be found. in which applique takes the place of stitchery or supplements it. There are some beautiful old embroidered carpets extant from colonial and early Victorian days. Plate 20 shows one on homespun blanketing. It is of tambour work. A fine sense of design and a hint of knowledge of classic rug patterns is evident, for the tree of life is as clearly portrayed as on many an old Persian carpet. It is impossible to say at this date whether the design is an original expression of this famous motif, an adaptation of a rug pattern interpreted in the terms of early American rug craft, or whether the design was copied as exactly as possible from some ceramic ornamentation. By whatever way it found itself on the rug, there is represented in it the artistry of the young maiden, who by tradition made the rug, even to the spinning of the yarn and the weaving of the textile as a part of her marriage portion. The embroidered carpet is made in 2 breadths, for no loom of that day could weave a material wide enough for a carpet. As the word carpet was interchangeably used in olden times to designate a floor covering, a wall hanging, and a cover for a divan or table, this quaint carpet may well prove an inspiration for a wall hanging embroidered today. To keep it true to type, use a woolen homespun for the background. Canadian homespun is excellent and not costly. The design should be open and in peasant style. It can be supplemented with applique. A hanging of this sort in classic peasant art has the background of heavy, round thread linen textile. It is ornamented with braid, crocheted motifs, and stitchery. The basket is of openly plaited strips of brown braid. The blossoms and leaves are in coarse yarn, crocheted to form correct shapes, while ornamental stitchery supplies tendrils, leaves, etc. It adorns the walls of an old-fashioned dining room. As will be seen by the decoration, this hanging would not be suited to a floor covering, but is delightful as a hanging. However, the same kind of linen is excellent for rugs, both those embroidered with stitchery alone or with quilting as well. Sufficient body must be supplied in such rugs, either by the thicknesses of fabric that is united by quilting, or else by lining and interlining. Among the early embroidered carpets of America that are notable, the one known as the Caswell carpet, now in the possession of Homer Eaton Keyes, Esquire, is unparalleled for diversity of design and for size in the type of stitchery, tambour work in which it is developed. No 2 of the scores of squares or oblong sections that unite to make the carpet are duplicates, nor are they pictorially related. Each is a separate entity. In this feature, the carpet outdoes the quaint patchwork quilt of coordinated pattern, which, it would seem, must have been the inspiration for the special type of sectional structure used in the floor covering. The carpet suggests the scattered pages of old-time picture books of unequal size, spread out and fitted together as best they could be, in which each page tells its own story or gives some particular delineation. One picture, for instance, of a woman presenting to a man a bit of fruit, like an apple, immediately brings to mind the biblical story of Adam and Eve and the apple, with the thought that the needle might have been substituted for the brush in reproducing an antiquated illustration. Some sections are reminiscent of gay English, French, and India prints, while others are typical of designs found on ceramics. The colors are as soft as those found in an antique saraband rug, and the stitchery almost as profuse. Plate 21 faintly portrays the charm of one of the picture page sections. Whatever was the spur to the spectacular fancy of the maker, one Zeruiah Higley Guernsey, afterwards Mrs. Caswell by marriage, The carpet is expressive of a fertile imagination and a versatile personality. Not only did she design the carpet, but records state that she prepared all the materials, which were homegrown wool, homespun and home dyed, and the foundation, home woven as in the Whitney rug. While the carpet represents her handiwork, she did receive some little help, and had the kindly grace to acknowledge it by having the initials of the two persons worked in the sections they did. Her own name is lettered in full, together with the date 1835, which may stand for the year of beginning the carpet, of its completion, or some interim between. Her helpers were two Indian boys, known to have been guests of the family when the carpet was being made. The designs of the sections they worked are not Indian creations, however, for patterns prevailing in the mid-Victorian era are typical throughout and nowhere show Indian characteristics, which are utterly dissimilar. The Caswell carpet, like the Plein Moor carpet, has a deep indentation along one side where the carpet fitted about a chimney or hearth. In the former, the allowance was quite evidently made for a hearth instead of a chimney, as in the Moor carpet. The grounds for this deduction are established by the presence of an adjustable separate section in the Caswell carpet, which deftly fits into the indentation. When summer came and blazing logs were needed no more in the fireplace, it was safe to cover the hearth close to the fireboard, and this section then was set in position, giving symmetry to the floor covering. Burlap was sometimes used in old-time embroidered rugs for the backgrounds, and so precedent is provided for the burlap embroidered rug of today. A good grade of the textile is now available. On it, the stitchery of counted threads can be used. Since the weave is rectilinear Assisi work, cross-stitch, etc., can bring out ancient Coptic designs and old Indian patterns, or the stitchery can be used to make silhouette rugs of up-to-date novelty. Chain stitch, worked without reference to the weave, and any other stitches that are flat can be employed for the rug embroidery. These rugs are excellent for cottages, chambers in which old-style painted furniture, not modernistic, is used, for farmhouses kept true to furnishings formerly standing in the rooms, for sun porches and upper halls. A type of stitchery admirably adapted to rug craft is found in darned embroidery. It has been put to some slight use, but in so simplified and modified a form that it bears little resemblance to the old-fashioned work. It remains for the present rug makers to raise the standard and make it worthy of its fine ancestry. The stitch is nothing more nor less than that known in plain sewing as running. The rules transforming it into darned embroidery are to have the stitch on the right side of the work twice as long as on the wrong, and to have the work in rows with stitches alternately spaced. Only a few threads of the textile are caught up by the needle, or the upper stitch covering twice as many threads would be too long to wear well. Any textile suited to embroidered rug making can be employed: linen, woolen homespun, burlap, etc., except cross-stitch canvas. This and textiles that cannot be left visible must be avoided. Darned embroidery is one of antiquity in India. In the 16th century it was introduced into England, entering as much through Portugal as Spain, a usual source, owing to the alliance of royalty through King Charles with the Portuguese Princess Catherine of Braganza. It is worthy of note that needlecraft was, in the past, considered one of the fine arts to be cultivated. It traveled from one country to another, and was seized upon as an asset of beauty and homemaking, and in secular as well as ecclesiastical art. Darning stitch is identical with that used in quilting, which went from India, then Spain, Italy, and Portugal, through the Arabs and Moors, and thence to England. In darning, it is developed differently from quilting. The East Indian darning is full of subtleties. such as changing the direction of lines to conform to contours. This supplies not only an effect of shading, but even of action, as, for instance, when used in a raised arm or a leg thrust forward in walking or running. In this work, the stitchery was employed to embroider the design. Today in rug making, it may be put to the identical use, or the darning may form the positive, worked background to throw in relief the negative, unworked design. Or again, both styles of embroidery may be used on the same rug. Background darning was a pronounced feature in the renaissance of the work in the middle of the 19th century. Then patterns were bold rather than intricate. In rug craft, it is this later type of bold design that finds itself at home. It is used variously, sometimes to develop patterns and sometimes backgrounds, the positive pattern being more favored. It is scarcely more artistic in the heavier character of work demanded by rug making. A definite type of darning embroidery having a vogue in rug craft uses a honeycomb or waffle canvas foundation. The medium is run under the raised bars formed by the weave. These bars separate the medium as if many smaller stitches were taken, though they are not. The work is a rapidly done embroidery and darning style and is described fully in the chapter on chenille rugs, because chenille is a favorite medium for this work. Yarn and even rags can be used, however, as is there pointed out. Darned rugs are not to be confused with Marquetry embroidered rugs. The former can be done on any fabric suited to rug making as described, while the latter require a specific textile. All these rugs should be lined. Embroidered rugs, whether done in cross-stitch, chain-stitch, darning, etc., should be dignified in design and worked in shades of sufficient depth to suit the purpose. What are known as oriental colors are commended. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Rugs of Chenille and Caterpillar Braid, Marquetry Mats. Rugs of caterpillar braid are unlike any other type of homecraft rug, and when expertly made, have a charm entirely their own. Among the notable designs used in these antique rugs is the cabbage, mentioned with cowcumbers, as sometimes found on rugs of Turkey work. The thistle lends itself admirably, as do all flowers, preferably conventionalized, that have raggedy edges. France is the country in which chenille was invented, about the middle of the 18th century. It was much used for court embroideries. No less a personage than Marie Antoinette embroidered with it, and some of the articles she made are treasured. The chenille was in high favor for two reasons: its beauty and the rapidity with which embroidery could be done with it. It will be seen at once that such attributes lend themselves well to rug making. The French word chenille, when translated, has the same meaning as caterpillar braid in English. The soft delicacy of the fuzzy strands immediately suggests the slender, round, and downy body of the larva insect. Manufactured chenille is the genuine medium. Caterpillar braid is its crude imitation. Chenille may be of silk, which is fine and so closely woven that it resembles a velvet cord, lustrous and flexible, or the tiny filaments, spun at right angles into a central cord of cotton or linen, may be of worsted or linen. Whatever the pile, it gives name to the chenille, such as cotton chenille, worsted chenille, etc. Lady Llanover makes mention of a particular sort of worsted chenille made on a flax cord, praising it because of its being impervious to moths. Surely an excellent recommendation. Homecraft chenille or caterpillar braid rugs belong to two classes: those fashioned from manufactured chenille, which, like yarn, can be bought for rug making, and those in which the yarn itself is homemade. The difference in type between these two is fundamental. Chenille pile is so easily flattened down and so sinuous that, threaded into a chenille or crewel needle, it can be drawn through a textile like any heavy yarn, after which it will assume its former size and shape. This is because of its resilience. It is admirably suited to rug work on honeycomb canvas. It slips under the raised cross strands of the weave with facility and fluffs out in the square or hexagon shapes between, usually filling them adequately with a single or double strand. It is better suited, from its inherent structure, than any other medium for embroidery on such a textile. The stitchery, when wrought on honeycomb or waffle canvas, gives the effect of darning, though the threaded needle is merely run under the bars of the weave. When these bars form hexagons, the canvas is called honeycomb. When they form squares, waffle cloth is the usual name. These bars break the line of the embroidery medium, and no short stitches have to be taken, as in regulation darning. On these textiles, the work assumes a geometric precision and squareness that is responsible for the name of Marquetry mats which is given them. The running stitchery on such canvas is so easy that in the latter part of the 19th century it was called in England by the descriptive name of little folks' work. Whether this name came to America or not, the work did, and continued to employ the fingers of little folk over here for generations. I can well remember working mats of this very kind when I was a little girl, my mother having made the design, and I can testify to its marvelous rapidity and quaint effectiveness. Since Marquetry mats embroidered in chenille are suitable for summer cottage chambers and for bathroom floors. If for informal main rooms or halls, they should be developed in rather dark tones to give them rug character. They may be worked to carry out the color scheme of any interior. A mat in this work to spread on the floor to step on when getting out of a bath is excellent. For this, choose a white canvas foundation and use rather delicate tones for the stitchery. A negative design, unworked, with a positive worked background picturing birds, as noted in Assisi work, would be appropriate and unique. Or the birds themselves may be done in the stitchery and the background left negative. There should, of course, be a border. It may be of several rows of straight running in consecutive lines, a Greek fret, or some other angular pattern. Both design and background are frequently worked on honeycomb canvas. The design should be run in first and then the background. The material should be heavy enough for no rug frame to be necessary, though many workers prefer to thumbtack the foundation into either a rug frame or an embroidery frame. Threads must not be pulled taut, but be allowed to lie smoothly and give with the goods. They must not, however, be so loose that they have the slightest serpentine effect. No stamped or transfer pattern is needed, as the work is done with counted threads or squares, as in cross-stitch. It is easy to see how readily cross-stitch and fillet patterns can be adapted to this embroidery. Designs can be copied from American basketry or motifs in ancient Peruvian art. Booklets published and for sale by the American Museum of Natural History, New York City, on basketry and Peruvian art will be found helpful. Also, booklets of similar character published by the Victoria and Albert Museum, South Kensington, London, England. Chenille hooked rugs have a marvelous finish if a high grade of the medium is employed. Such rugs are not as cheap as rag rugs, more nearly approximating the cost of yarn-made hooked rugs. There are grades of cotton chenille made for craft rugs, but while they are not expensive, Neither can they be described as handsome. Yet they are strong and have the resilience of pile germane to higher grades. The thrifty way to make a chenille hooked rug is to ravel out old chenille pochets or other articles, large enough to supply sufficient medium, and use the chenille ravelings. Many handsome homecraft chenille rugs are so made. Chenille handicraft rugs may be loom woven, using a simple frame loom. Such a rug resembles what has come to be known as a domestic Smyrna rug, for the pile or fur, as the filaments are technically styled, protrudes on both sides of the warp, making a reversible floor covering. These should not be confused with manufactured chenille rugs, which are among the finest of all power loom carpets. The reason for this is that the preparation of the chenille is elaborate compared with other carpet yarns, and the rugs themselves require a higher percentage of actual handwork than other loom-woven rugs. The filaments are pressed back, making a double row of pile, and this is positioned, combed up, and beaten home by hand tools in much the same way that Oriental rugs are made. The rugs are totally unlike Smyrna rugs, but one kind of caterpillar craft rug is fashioned somewhat similarly. To make one of these chenille Smyrna rugs, the needle shuttle is threaded with the chenille and is woven over and under each alternate warp thread. Directions for making a frame loom and warping it are given in full in the chapter on needle-woven rugs. Or if the loom has an adjustable heddle, even of the simplest sort, all that is necessary in the weaving is to reverse the order of warp threads with it for each passage of the needle through the shed it creates, and then to press the weft firmly with a coarse comb against the already woven weft. Such a rug made with chenille has as much right to the name of Smyrna rug as has the domestic power loom floor covering bearing the same name, although in the latter the rugs have patterns supposedly Oriental. In turning from the chenille craft rugs made with the filament yarn to those in which the caterpillar braid is homemade, a difference is immediately apparent. They seem to have little in common, although the medium is handled in much the same fashion. Caterpillar braid is similar to genuine chenille in being fuzzy and somewhat circular, but there the likeness ends. It is sufficient, however, to warrant a name of parallel significance. The braid is made by cutting a textile, preferably woolen, that has a tendency to fray, into narrow bias strips about 1/2 or 3/4 inch wide. The cord on which the filaments of genuine chenille is woven is represented by a strong gathering thread run down the length of each strip, which may be of one piece of textile or several joined together. The braid, after being gathered, is drawn through the partly closed hand, which process increases the fraying. It is the frayed threads that correspond to the filaments or fur of chenille. The round formation of the braid is caused by rolling the strips between the palms. This braid is not used as real chenille fur. It is sewed to a foundation on which a design has been stamped or otherwise delineated, the colors of the braid bringing out the pattern. If a rug of solid color is wanted with a banded border, as found in so many genuine chenille rugs, ticking is recommended for the foundation, as the stripes serve as gauges to keep lines of work even. If the rug has a pattern, denim, khaki, or burlap is, as a rule, preferable, because plain, having no cross lines to distract from the design lines. Burlap is not as good as either of the other textiles on account of the loose weave, which in some of the other craft rug work is an advantage. In olden times, pieces of carpet, too worn for other use, were frequently employed, and are equally good today as they supply an excellent body to the rugs. When caterpillar rugs are made with the bias textile strips folded together from the gathering string, they bear a resemblance to those made of chenille, in which the filaments make a double width of fur. Either medium is fastened to a foundation textile by stitches taken through it and the medium. In caterpillar rugs, however, the strands are sewed to the foundation with needle and thread, not woven to it. The strips of fabric should be gathered enough to make them flare slightly at the ruffled edge, and should be sewed closely enough together to provide a pile firm and fuzzy. Care should be taken to keep all edges upright, as in chenille rugs. Before the sewing begins, the foundation should be bound or hemmed. If the rug is patterned, sew the caterpillar braid onto the design parts first, making the strands follow the outline contours, and afterwards fill in the background. Unless the foundation is sufficiently heavy to hold its shape of itself, it is wise to put it on a hooked rug frame to prevent its puckering while the braid is being sewed on. The foundation must be straight, flat, and even. Otherwise, when the rug is completed, the craftsmanship is poor and the rug will never be satisfactory. A caterpillar braid rug, when in plain colors with perhaps a darker or contrasting bordered edge or band let into the surface near the edge, is in character with a large proportion of the genuine chenille rugs in its color scheme. It is advisable, when sewing the medium onto the foundation, to start with the edges and work in completed rows toward the center, each strand going all the way around the foundation. The nap should incline toward the edge. The center row should be opened and sewed through the flat center to give a perfect finish. The stitchery on the rolled caterpillar braid varies somewhat from the folded gathered braid. The stitches must always catch down the gathering thread firmly, which requires something of the care and positioning mentioned in connection with chenille weaving. Part of the work in that, it will be remembered, is also done by hand. The rolled braid must be sewed so close together that the pile is firm and none of the foundation is visible. Of late years, manufactured chenille made for handicraft rugs has given some impetus to the weaving of these rugs, but the making of caterpillar braid has gradually lost favor because of the labor involved. Those who have old caterpillar braid rugs are fortunate and should prize them because of their quaint charm. Those who wish to fashion rugs that will be exclusive in craft and into which fascinating design effects can be introduced may well decide to make genuine caterpillar braid floor coverings. Marquetry mats, whether employing commercial chenille, coarse rug yarn, narrow strips of silk stockings, or fine jersey cloth as the medium, are practical for the nursery, bathroom, and other rooms, as suggested previously. They are very quickly made, and designs are brought out effectively, while the cost is very slight, all of which are points in their favor. The process of making rugs of caterpillar braid is intriguing, as the making of the braid is so definitely an attempt to copy the beautiful French chenille. Often the use of the braid closely follows loom methods, but with such totally different results that the rugs bear little resemblance to one another. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Shuck or Corn-Husk mats. Shuck mats are distinctive as well as the essence of thrift, for in them it would appear that something for nothing has been attained. The mats are made and sold by the mountaineer women of Tennessee and Kentucky. Occasionally, after the husking season, when shucks abound, The mats are made also by women on farms scattered over the country. Those who buy the mats delight in unusual and ingenious folk craft that is really good. So these mats have the distinction of gracing the floors as outer doormats in the homes of the wealthy and the poor alike. They are democratic in their adaptability to surroundings and in looking equally well suited to each type of house. The mats are preeminently doormats or floor coverings for verandas. For the latter purpose, they may be so large that the term rug would be natural to apply to them, just as it is used for grass and fiber mats. The name mat is so accurate and descriptive, however, that it seems a pity to abandon it for the more aristocratic name of rug in the lore of floor coverings. The word mat signifies a texture of sedges, flags, or rushes, and rushes are described as anything proverbially worthless. Corn shucks, by right of texture and value, fulfill both conditions. They are closely allied botanically to the plants mentioned and have been counted as worthless, proverbially, since the days of the prodigal son. To convert the shucks into attractive and useful mats is an achievement comparable only to the manipulating of rushes into seats for chairs. It is worthy of note that just as rush-bottomed chairs enjoy a renaissance periodically, so also do corn-husk or shuck mats. Beyond a doubt, shuck mats have their origin and inspiration from necessity. They cost absolutely nothing, if homemade, except the thread with which the braids are sewed together, yet they have a fascination apart from price valuation. The color is pleasing, with its insistent variation of the natural tone characteristic of dried shucks. The braided work is a favorite in rug craft. The durability of the mats is remarkable. The rapidity of the work is appealing. The ingenious thriftiness tickles the fancy, and the mat has an element of the out of doors about it that immediately presupposes a place by the threshold of some outside door or on a porch. The medium is so admirably suited to the purpose of the mats that they bear the stamp of consistency, always gratifying. Ingenuity is an essential ingredient of handicraft, and while thrift was the reason for shuck mats originally, it was ingenious thrift requiring imagination. Indeed, it was inventiveness solely that inspired one young woman living in the beautiful Berkshire Hills to make a shuck mat. She told me that after watching her brother splice ropes, she conceived the idea of splicing corn husks. Wishing to make her strands prove useful as her brother did his rope, she concluded to braid them and see if she could not make a doormat. It took her just 1 week to braid and sew enough spliced corn husk strands for her mat. Her success in this venture can be reckoned by the fact that the mat was used for many years at the side door of the farmhouse, where it had the opportunity to test its strength daily by constant service in the wiping off of dusty and muddy boots. It was made for use, and it had it in full measure. For porch mats, the dried shucks can be dyed to give them color, which can be introduced into borders and bands. One hue may suffice, or several may be included. The field should be in the natural tone and also border bands, separating those of color. For veranda and sun porch floor coverings, large shuck mats can be made. These, when finished with ornamental borders, have the attractiveness of the fancy grass rugs now so much in evidence for porches. In connection with the dyes used for the borders, it is wise to prepare quite a bit more than needed at first. It is impossible to calculate with definiteness the amount of shucks that should be dyed for a given length of braid, since the size of sedges is so variable. By using the precautionary measure of having extra dyes, the identical shade can be duplicated in the easiest way. Collecting shucks for mat making is a simple matter if one lives on a farm where corn for the table or for fodder is raised. Even if one lives in the city and corn is a favorite vegetable, the shucks will accumulate surprisingly fast. The husks should be separated, spread out and dried, preferably in the sun, bound into bundles and saved like rags for rugs. Then, when the opportunity comes, the shucks can be braided and the mat making progress, whatever the season of year. The work is not without fascination and the result gratifying. If the rug maker chooses, she can start splicing and braiding the strands as soon as the shucks are dried. This I have found satisfactory. The preparation of the shucks and the plaiting of them into braided mats is fraught with no difficulties. It is akin to the original mat making of prehistoric times, for it is generally agreed that floor coverings with any semblance of weaving were first made of grasses, sedges, and the like. They were intertwined to form a continuous flat surface, even though an uneven one. Today, more finesse is used in the making of mats of like character. The rudiments of weaving that the Aborigines employed are apparent in their simplicity in braided shuck mats, while in textiles we have the weaving developed to the highest degree. It is easy to see that if the primitives, with all their handicaps, made floor coverings of plaited strands, modern people more privileged than they can fashion braided shuck mats with facility. The strands for braiding should be made from as many shucks as will form a width from 3/4 to 1 inch wide when united in a 3-strand braid. Braids of this size, when slightly dampened, are as pliable as fabric. This they should be during the process of sewing together when the mat is being made. Wider braids can be used, but they are not so manageable. Start each strand by binding 3, 4, or 5 shucks together, alternating wide and tapering ends so that the bulk is equalized at the top and for some distance down the strand. Do not attempt to have husks come out evenly at the ends. This must be avoided, for it would mean the simultaneous introduction of another set of husks, and the joining would be noticeable. It is the continual inserting of one husk after another at irregular intervals that splices the strand together evenly and firmly as spliced rope, which is as strong at the juncture of joining as at any other part. Another matter of importance is to keep the strand of uniform size. There should be no bulging nor diminishing of size that would be noticeable after the strands are plaited. It soon becomes second nature to detect discrepancies in strands. As soon as one is noticeable in any strand, tuck the tip of another husk under one of those in the strand so that the joining is invisible and no loose end sticks out. Continue the process of splicing and braiding the strands throughout the entire length needed for the rug, unless it is an extra large size. Then it may be easier to finish off a braid and sew the end as neatly as possible to the wrong side of the rug. When another length of braid, such as a gay border, is completed, begin the sewing again. Do not start it where the other ended, but at some other spot, thus preserving a uniformly even surface. Shucks can be braided after they are partially dry, but not while they are green. Then they are too tender and are liable to tear. Moreover, they will mildew and discolor, and instead of having the soft play of color shading from a deep cream to corn color with occasional wisteria hues, spots will appear. Shucks braided when nearly dry are pliable. If absolutely dry, they should be wrung out in a damp cloth precisely as if they were raffia. Do not immerse in water, for then they get so wet that the danger of mildewing returns. As soon as a few yards of braid are finished, the sewing of the mat can begin. This I have found preferable to waiting until all the braiding is completed. Dampen the braid slightly to make it flexible. This is imperative if a round mat is to be made, for the curves are sharp in the center and the strain on strands should be relieved. The forming and sewing of shuck braids into mats is precisely like that of other braided rugs in round and oval shapes. These are the two styles in which shuck mats are made. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Sacking mats and string rugs. Sacking mats derive their name from the fabric from which they are made. They would, in America, be called burlap mats today had they originated in this era. Since they were developed in England, when the material was called by the name of the purpose to which it was put, the mats went under the name of bagging or sacking mats. It is quite likely that they often were called by the more specific name of coffee bagging mats, for the sacks in which coffee was imported into England were so termed interchangeably with sacking. It is also true that coffee bags were made of a coarse, heavy linen, in some instances so tightly woven as to be practically impervious to water, and so durable that they withstood the many handlings incident to shipping, and the hard usage, with no apparent detriment. It has been my good fortune to get some of these coffee bean bags, and a more durable rug material it would be difficult indeed to find. Occasionally to this day, such bags can be bought from retail grocers who buy coffee beans direct from importers and so get them in the sacks. The linen is badly soiled, of course, but by soaking and scrubbing and thoroughly rinsing, it regains its natural color. A bag is so large that when ripped along the seams at one side and across one end, it is of sufficient size to make a seamless mat. Sacking mats were made in England in the early part of the 19th century, possibly earlier, but the fact that Brussels carpet was sometimes recommended as the lining for such mats certainly is illuminating. Carpets were estimated in those years as marvels of the weaver's skill and treasured floor coverings in the home. To use a bit of carpet to line so insignificant a rug as a sacking mat indicates that the carpet must have been so badly worn as to be worthless in itself as a floor covering. Since Brussels carpets are noted for their durability, a mat for which a worn strip formed the lining could not have been fashioned when the century was very young. It is scarcely to be supposed, however, that Brussels carpet formed the first lining for sacking mats, nor that it was the most usual one, though the best. Consequently, this reference to the carpet can be used only as a clue to the approximate time when sacking mats were in vogue as thrifty floor coverings. Though used sporadically in rug craft previous to this time, it is interesting to note that from that day to this, sacking, bagging, hessian, or burlap, by whichever name it is called, has been favored for rug making. It is not usually employed, however, for anything except foundations, to be concealed by stitchery of one sort or another. It is the regulation hooked rug foundation fabric, and has been from the early days, even though the finest hooked rugs made at first were on homespun linen. There are many instances also in which burlap was employed as a foundation for embroidery. It lends itself well in respect to its weave, for the threads run straight and are coarse enough for the embroidery of counted stitches, such as cross-stitch, tent stitch, Gobelin stitch, and all canvas stitches. Sacking was also used as the foundation for string work rugs in England. These rugs are often confused with hooked rugs because of the similarity of the surfaces of the two, which, it must be confessed, are practically identical. Hence, the mistake is not strange. It is in the construction of the two types of rugs that the difference exists. Both the hooked rug and the string work rug are made of loops of yarn, forming a pile coming through a sacking foundation. But in the former, the loops are pulled through, while in the latter they are pushed through. The string work process of punching the yarn through the sacking is that of the punch-hooked rug work done with any one of several kinds of mechanical punch hooks. But again, a difference is found. In string work, the process is laborious, for after punching the 4-inch strands of yarn through the interstices of the sacking, pushed apart with a large stiletto, the ends are all tied to prevent them from pulling out. In the punch hook work, a continuous strand of coarse yarn is threaded into the mechanical stiletto-like needle. It is then punched through the sacking and withdrawn, leaving a loop of yarn to be held by the pressure of the strands of the textile, which are continually forced more closely together as the work progresses. It is possible with string work of this kind to make exquisite knot-tied rugs, but they would be as arduous to construct as Oriental rugs and would lack the durability of the latter, in which the knots come on the right side of the surface and have more resistance. The balance in favor of making string work rugs is too small for them to be considered as anything but interesting 19th century thrift rugs, but they are essentially craft floor coverings. The punch-hooked rug has speed in construction to recommend it, but it also has a certain definite mechanical quality that is at variance with true handicraft. While the old English string work mats obviously preceded hooked rugs and have definite similarities, they were but forerunners rather than incipient hooked rugs. In the evolution of stitchery to suit rugcraft, there is a much closer and more subtle transition to be found. In foundations, sacking remains the approved one. Apart from the sacking rugs developed in what is known as string work described, there is another style that is equally true to type and which rug makers of today can use to good advantage. This is the embroidered sacking mat, which is, in reality, but another form of the Frisian or cross-stitch rug, for this stitch was the one originally employed on embroidered sacking mats. Since burlap today is made in an excellent grade, with needlecraft as one of its intended purposes, the foundations of sacking mats are more worthy of the stitchery than at any previous time. The burlap can be had in numerous tones, thus making it possible to introduce color in the foundation of the rug as well as the embroidery. Designs should be formal. Sacking mats embroidered in Assisi work take on a classic character that raises them above the ordinary level. Should the rugs be ornamented with applique, they enter the category of patchwork floor coverings. The one essential, whatever the ornamentation, is that the rug's surface is invariably burlap, for it is this that keeps the rugs true to type. Sacking mats, however developed, require lining. This has already been indicated. The quaint old mats were bordered with a fringe made by raveling out the sacking, purposely left outside the embroidery. Strands of the yarn pulled through the sacking formed a gay upper layer of fringe. Another rug finish that lends itself well to these mats is a border of scalloped cloth in 2 layers. The colors should be those found in the rug surface and embroidery, while the buttonhole stitchery about each scallop should be in a like medium to that used on the rug. It may be black, if not one of the dark-toned yarns. When artistry is put into the pattern, the stitchery, and the color scheme of sacking rugs, They deserve a place among modern floor coverings that are quickly and easily made at small cost. A close rival of the sacking mat, both from the viewpoint of its modest medium and its unpretentious name, is the string rug. It also originated in England. Both the names sacking and string mats remained on the other side of the water, even when rugs of the same sort or exact counterparts were included in American rug craft. One type of string rug has already been alluded to. Its right to the name springs from another definition of string than the one so familiar to us now, namely cord or cotton twine. It comes from the meaning of a slender strip and a connected series. No actual cord was used in the construction of the rug, but the entire surface was made of slender strips, either oddments of yarn or raveled jute, put together in a connected series, the sacking being the medium of connecting them successively. The tools were a stiletto and a crochet hook to push and pull the strands through the foundation. The yarn and the ravelings were mere strings, odds and ends, as thriftily used as rags in rug making. The difference in the construction of string mats and hooked rugs has already been sufficiently dwelt upon. There seems to have been little attention given to artistry in the string rugs, though they could so easily have been excellent in design. In hooked rag rugs, patterns were featured. The second type of string rugs derives its name from the fact that actual string was used in connection with odds and ends or strings of yarn, worsted, or any fleecy wool. These rugs come under the present classification of knitted rugs, fully described in the chapter on that subject. In string rugs, the knitting medium is invariably soft string. The number of stitches cast on is directed to be 36, though for modern purposes this number does not have to be adhered to. The pile portion forming the surface of the rug was made from the yarn tied together before using and wound into a ball. It is apparent that the design must have been, always, that known to us as hit or miss. Every alternate row of knitting was composed of loop pile, made by winding the yarn 3 times over the forefinger of the left hand and knitting a coil into each stitch. The length of the rug depended on the length of the knitted strips, and its width on the number of strips. There was a chance lost for artistry in these rugs that can be captured in modernized string rugs, but the economy of the string foundation cannot be improved. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Minor Rugs in Variety. Under the heading of minor rugs in variety are grouped those made from peculiar mediums, such as carpet, stockings, candlewick, clothesline, paper, textile silk, etc. Those treated with pigments, whether painted, dyed, stained, or ornamented with stenciled patterns, and those which, by virtue of their excessive thriftiness, rather than any other inherent qualifications, merit notice as seen in tidbit, tufted, ravel rugs, etc. In fact, those rugs in which the medium has attained a certain prominence, which, though novel and interesting, is not sufficient to make the rugs assume a major place. The greater part of these rugs belong to the group in peculiar mediums. Since it is the material and not the craft that is of import, it will be found that the rugs in every instance can be fashioned in more than one type. Therefore, in former chapters, when mediums have been noted, mention has been made of them. It is because in recent years there has been a tendency to make more minute classifications that most of these minor rugs find themselves separately featured. Some have always been in a class by themselves, as instanced in old-time carpet rugs, while others are new as well as different, such as paper rugs. Carpet rugs. Since the word carpet denotes all kinds of textile floor coverings, the term carpet rug would appear to be either a misnomer or a duplication of words, were it not for the fact that there is a particular kind of rug that bears this name. This rug sprang into prominence about 1825, though isolated carpet rugs were previously fashioned. In order to appreciate the one-time value of carpet rugs, it is necessary to realize the high place held by power loom floor coverings during the period of their early manufacture. So accustomed have we become to finely made carpets today that it comes with something of a surprise to know that it was not until 100 years ago that they became a common commodity in home furnishings in America. The first carpet factory in the United States was set up in 1791. It took 50 years to bring the production to the place where it could meet in any adequate way the ever-increasing demand, putting the date forward to 1841. Prior to 1800, these power loom carpets, except those made on the first looms, were imported to America. They were costly and scarce. It is worthy of note in passing that today America is second to no country in the manufacture of power loom carpets and rugs. It will be seen that in the early American days, carpets naturally were prized possessions of householders. Every scrap of such floor covering was put to good use in carpet rugs, covers for hassocks and footstools, etc. Carpet bags remain historic in travelers' accoutrements of those times. But among all the uses to which odds and ends of carpet were put, that of carpet rugs is the one of immediate concern. It was when carpets were so worn as to be unsightly that they began to be cut down into rug sizes. Finally, when only small lengths were usable, handicraft was resorted to in order to increase the size and make them big enough and sufficiently ornamental to be worthy of use. The small pieces were bordered by many rows of rug braid, or of knit or crocheted strips. Today, these rugs do not hold any high place as floor coverings, but in the past they were rugs of prestige, denoting opulence in the homes where such carpets could be afforded. Gradually, the time came when carpet centers were sought because they decreased the work required to make a rug, and it is for this same reason that today they are liked by busy homemakers. Another type of carpet rug was popular in the middle of the 19th century. It was made from ingrain carpet in single, 2, or 3-ply weights. It was cut into narrow lengths, the edges of which formed the surface of pile fashioned from the strips. This type of carpet rug is recommended for modern use, as such rugs are durable, soft to the tread, and have an indefinite neutral color, minus pattern. These characteristics make them fit in well with present decorative schemes. The rugs can be doormat or carpet size. In general appearance, they are not unlike the rugs of Smyrna type that are reconstructed by factory processes from old carpets and rugs sent to be transformed into such floor coverings. The Homecraft rugs are made by cutting diagonal strips 1 inch or 1 1/4 inches wide from the strong parts of smooth-faced carpets or rugs. The strips are sewed through the lengthwise center onto ticking or some equally strong foundation fabric. Ticking has its characteristic value in the color stripes of the weave, which can be taken advantage of as gauges when sewing. Turn raw edges of the foundation over once onto the right side of the textile. Commence fashioning the rug by sewing a row of the bias carpet around the entire edge. Strips should not overlap when joined, but one end should fit against another as if one piece. Each successive strip is sewed so close to the preceding one that all carpet edges are held upright by pressure. The thickness of the carpet determines the closeness. The upright bias edges fray slightly, just enough to supply a soft appearance to the stout pile. Since this deep pile is unpatterned, there should be a border of contrasting color extending all about the edge, though it may be at each end only. It may be that the pieces from a second carpet or rug can supply such differing tone to the rug field, or it may be necessary to resort to the dye pot. If so, cut the strips before dyeing. They can be handled easier. These pile rugs are the best of the handicraft carpet rugs. They do not emphasize the fact that they are made to utilize old floor coverings, for in them thrift appears in its virtuous aspect. The name carpet rug has become commercialized in those lengths of carpet, chiefly samples, that are sold with or without fringe for the purpose of handy scatter rugs. These are decidedly commonplace in any but plain carpet lengths, as they immediately bespeak their origin because patterns are interrupted and incomplete. However, the Homecraft rug maker can follow this commercial suggestion and in the same way use length from carpets she has. It is quite possible for her to cut down and remodel a large carpet or rug and get a good-sized floor covering therefrom, especially if no attention is paid to matching the pattern. Such a rug should be sent to a dye house and be dyed a flat color. It then takes its place with new rugs of this type, providing the pile is good, the remodeling skillful, and the color suitable for the room in which it is to be used. Such a rug should have the edges so bound that the binding will not show when it comes from the dye pot. A favorite old use for worn carpets was to ravel them out and use the yarn so obtained for making rugs. Since such yarns were spun expressly for floor covering manufacture, they were and are eminently suited to rug craft. They have a quality that resists wear of boots and shoes. They can be used in the making of any yarn rugs. If the color is not right, the dye pot can change it. Such salvage of old carpet mediums remains excellent today. No hint of economy is visible, as the yarn is used exactly as if new. Stocking rugs. Because amateur rug makers have used the term so frequently, the inelegant name of stocking rug is fastening itself upon floor coverings made from old and new hosiery. It is not a name used by expert rug makers, although they recognize the medium as excellent. These rugs belong by right to the rag rug group, stockings being cut into strips and used exactly as rag strands. There is an excess of thriftiness needlessly proclaimed when they are called stocking rugs. The reason why stockings, also jersey cloth and other knit-woven textiles, are especially good for rugs is that after the strands have been cut, they coil, making a twisted medium resembling rug yarn. The coils are coarse or fine according to the width of the strands. They will always curl over the right side, presenting the wrong as the outside. It is a mistake to attempt to reverse this natural order, for it is practically impossible. And fortunately for rug craft, the wrong side of the weave is as good, if not better. In cutting stockings, start the strand at the toe and cut in a circular spiral to the top. One continuous length will result. Allowance must be made for the differences of weight in the weave. Hence, the strand should be cut wider where the stocking is sheer and narrower where it is heavy. Uniformity of size in the finished length is essential. These strands can be employed in all rag rug work and occasionally as yarn strands in other styles of rugs. For instance, a fine stocking strand can be used for embroidering on canvas when the mesh is 4 holes to the inch. In whatever way the medium is used in rug craft, stocking rugs appeal to the thrifty because they provide a good use for old hosiery. So satisfactory is the medium, however, that rug makers often buy seconds in stockings, dyeing the white ones to suit any tones necessary to a color scheme. When it is possible to purchase this hosiery from a factory, the outlay is appreciably diminished. Candlewick rugs. The name candlewick rug has a quaint rather than a prosaic sound. Although the rugs can be made in any craft in which heavy yarn is ordinarily employed, and in most of those in which rags are the medium, the specific name should not be abandoned. The lightly twisted cord can always be obtained in white, as it is nothing more nor less than the cotton cord used for the wicks of candles. At the present time, candlewick is in the forefront of fashion for embroidering spreads and many other articles, and it is available in many colors. Should others be needed, the medium dyes easily, being light to manage and absorbent. Any rug maker can dye her own supply if she so elects. If, in addition to doing this, she purchases the wick wholesale from a candle supply concern, the cost of the medium is diminished, as in the case of hosiery. It is unnecessary to give details for making candlewick rugs, as the maker can follow directions given elsewhere in any craft she selects. Needleweaving is one craft, however, that may be mentioned as lending itself especially well, since candlewick is a favorite medium for homecraft needlewoven rugs. Clothesline rugs. Clothesline rugs derive their name from the use of this rope as a filler over which to crochet a finer medium. Cotton clothesline is used. It may remain white or be dyed. When colored, coarse string is the medium for crochet, extra strength is supplied. The rope should be clearly visible between interstices in the work, as in warp and weft crochet, in which a chain stitch is taken between each plain crochet stitch. When clothesline is used as a filler for rag crochet rugs, the rope is concealed, acting merely as additional weight for the rag strands, which should be cut rather narrow. Clothesline rugs can be decidedly attractive in appearance as well as strong. They are at home not only in kitchens and back halls, but on porches and in summer bungalows. For back halls, braided clothesline makes very durable doormats. Paper rugs. Paper has been used in rug craft, but more in an experimental than a practical way. The paper is made into a stout, soft cord. This is woven on a loom. A frame loom is adequate, or it may be braided as jute. Braided paper rugs are shellacked, giving them a high luster and added durability. Woven paper rugs are more suitable for table covers, or border carpets, as they were called in olden times, than for floor carpets. Paper has proved suited to so many purposes to which it appeared ill-adapted at first, that it may eventually become an approved material for rug craft, but if it is to meet with the favor of rug makers, its price must be low. Textile silk rugs. The most exquisite textile used in homecraft rug making is silk, but for this very reason it is one of the least practical. It is too delicate to stand the strain of the hard usage, the textile being totally unlike the silken threads employed by Oriental rug makers in their famous silk rugs. It should be borne in mind in connection with these Eastern carpets that they are always considered works of genuine art, to be used for special purposes and never to be stepped upon, except with unshod or slippered feet. Homecraft rugs are in a different category, preeminently practical, albeit handsome. They must have durability under friction of hard-heeled shoes. Notwithstanding its very evident drawbacks, silk has been employed by handicraft rug makers so often that silk rugs warrant a special classification. As table carpets, they deserve merit. For Davenport mats and chair rugs, they are equally good. For wall hangings, they are in their element. Many of the rugs illustrated elsewhere can serve delightfully as silken hangings, either embroidered or wrought in other crafts. It is in the realm of floor coverings that silk rugs are under a disadvantage. If a rug maker has a large amount of silk rags and finally decides to make a floor rug, she is wise to determine upon one with a pile either knit or crocheted. In these, a certain latitude in the matter of wear is permissible, for even when the rags tear at the tips or wear down in occasional places, it does not spoil the rug completely. This is not so in hooked pile, where each loop, cut or uncut, is a stitchery unit in a precise pattern, more intricately developed than in the other two-pile rugs given. A silk rug, when braided, crocheted, woven, knit, or hooked, may grace a table, couch, or chair as a mat of beautiful texture. One such table rug in shades of green, wrought in rows from light in the center to deep green on the edge, is used in an old New England farmhouse transformed into a summer guest house. It is the delight of visitors and the pride of the maker. The braid is approximately 1/2 inch wide. The rug is a yard long and oval in shape. Rugs treated with pigments. In turning to rugs ornamented with paint, stain, or dye, it will be found that the stenciled rug is chief among them. Grass rugs, old carpets, and lengths of matting can be given a new lease of life through good use of these agents. The entire surface of a faded grass rug, or one of similar character, can be treated with a weak solution of stain or be given a dye bath, and then have the border retouched to its original brightness. It will emerge almost as good as new. Or it may be that the border alone needs redoing to bring its worn places into their pristine freshness. Lengths of plain straw matting can be bound at the ends and have borders stenciled or painted on them, and thereby be transformed into good porch or cottage mats. Old carpets, when given baths of weak stain or dye, can continue to be good floor coverings if faded colors alone are responsible for their poor appearance. While such treatment will not bring back the identical colors, it will tone and mellow the entire surface in a pleasing way. The original hue that prevails should not be radically changed, or failure will result. Therefore, if gray, blue, green, mulberry, tan, etc. is the general color effect, the bath should be whichever one the specific carpet calls for. A rug or carpet must be thoroughly clean before giving it a bath in any of the agents. Mix enough solution for the entire treatment. Use a broad paintbrush and rub in the color well with it. Do not go over any surface more than once, lest an extra amount of color remain in that place and an uneven tone result. After once applying the color over the entire rug surface, it can be gone over again to deepen the whole tone, but the rug must be dry from one treatment before another is begun. If a rug remains on the floor during the process, lay many thicknesses of newspaper beneath it. The paper not only protects the floor, but absorbs any superfluous moisture that may seep through during the process. This same precaution should be exercised when a border only is dyed or stained. The use of any of these agents for restoring or ornamenting a floor covering is distinctly a matter of economy, although the results may prove entirely satisfactory. Thrifty floor coverings. Rugs that come under this classification are those in which beauty is of such small consideration that it is an incident merely. Utility is paramount. Such charm as exists in the finished floor covering is entirely an accident. Design is utterly wanting. The hit or miss method is followed to its uttermost length. But notwithstanding all these undesirable elements, the actual texture of the rug may be as comfortable to the feet as when beauty is present. A bare floor that would otherwise be hard and cold can be covered, protection be gained, and comfort furthered. When a homemaker is spurred on by necessity, such floor coverings are well warranted. One variety of these rugs is made of tidbits of cloth. The equipment is so simple that anyone can make it. It consists of a stout wire from 16 to 24 inches long, bent at the center, forming a huge hairpin, with prongs either 1 inch or 1 1/4 inches apart. These are kept parallel by 2 wooden wedges. One is put in close to the bend and the other near the ends of the wire pin. Rags, cut into strips to make a uniform size, are wound over the frame, commencing at the bent end, continuing to the open end. When the frame is so full it can hold no more, the top wedge is removed and the frame is put under the presser foot of a sewing machine. The rags are stitched down the center nearly to the lower wedge, which is then removed for the stitching to continue. After removing the frame from the machine, the rags are cut along the line of turning over the wire. This releases them from the frame, which is ready to be used again in the same way. When enough of these fringed strips are made to cover a foundation rug surface of sailcloth, denim, ticking, etc., the strips are stitched in close rows to it. The upstanding tips of cloth form a durable pile surface for the floor covering. If a busy homemaker cuts and winds the rags whenever she finds cloth that can be so utilized, without waiting for an accumulation of pieces, and stitches them as soon as the frame is full, the rug making progresses rapidly. A rug of this sort by a bedside is welcome to step upon, especially if the rags are woolen. The cartwheel mat is an old-time thrift floor covering. Its name comes from the implement of its construction, for it actually was the cast-off tire of the family carriage or farm wagon that was used for the rug frame, and over and about which the rag strands were wound, like the spokes of a wheel. These strands form the warp, about which other rag strands were interwoven as weft. The weaving began as near the center or hub as the closely overlapping spoke strands permitted, and was continued with regularity over and under each spoke until the rim was reached. The rug was released from its frame by cutting the spokes, which were then turned over the weft and sewed firmly in position. When extra warp was needed to ensure a close, even weave, other strands were introduced midway between each 2 spokes. Without doubt, these mats are responsible for the name cartwheel rugs, now given many types of round rugs. This same style of mat is made today over round frames, which may be iron cartwheel tires, children's wooden hoops, or extra heavy wire bent to form a circle. Tiny bits of cloth can be made into rag tufts and sewed to a foundation in primitive fashion, and another style of pile rug results. Cut the pieces circular. A $50, a large spool end, or a big button makes an excellent pattern for units. When these rugs are constructed, regardless of pattern or color combinations, they come under the classification of thrift rugs. They can be made, however, so that beauty is not a mere incident. They are no less cheap, and the artistry instilled puts them into the group of fabric pile rugs described in Chapter 16. When ravelings from old carpets or from garments are knit, crocheted, or otherwise made into floor coverings in hit or miss fashion, they too come under rugs of minor significance, for they are thrifty in the extreme. Beauty is but incidental. These same agents can be used with skill, however, to produce some of the choicest of homecraft rugs. It is the artistry displayed that is the criterion of excellence. It is indeed true that mediums may be of no intrinsic value, but if properly employed, like pigments in the hands of a master painter, they become agents of beauty in the hands of the homecraft rug maker. End of chapter 22. Chapter 23 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. The Care of Rugs, Their Repair and Reconstruction. The life of a rug is as dependent upon its care and repair as upon the fine quality of its materials and the excellence of its craftsmanship. Processes vary to suit different constructions. When only part of a rug is good, it is possible to salvage that for further usefulness. When the damage to a rug is local, mending can be successful, provided the worker knows the technique of the craft. Repairs should be as invisible as the type of the rug and its stitchery permit. Inserted textiles should match those first used. Colors in them and in working mediums should duplicate those existing in the floor covering at the time the repairs are made. New work should blend with old as if it were part of the original. To ensure new tones being identical with those in the rug, it may be necessary to fade, tone, or dye materials, even though they are leftovers from those used in the making of the rug. Materials are faded quickest by wringing from clear water and exposing to strong sunlight, repeating the process until the color is satisfactory. The mellowing effect of time on textiles can sometimes be gained by baths in weak tea or coffee. Occasionally, the dye pot may have to be resorted to. As modern commercial dyes are excellent and easy to use, rug makers of today are spared the tedium of making their own. This elimination simplifies rug making. At one time, the gathering of roots, bark, leaves, herbs, etc., the brewing and further preparation of them was a task in itself. It was essential then, but is unnecessary now. Science provides such satisfactory dyestuffs that they are universally employed in the Occident. Repairing rugs of superimposed classic stitchery, while not so difficult that it is beyond the powers of the homecraft rug maker to do, is nevertheless a fine art of mending. It requires precision and accuracy in each detail. Those who have charge of canvas needlepoint tapestries in museums dexterously repair the ravages of time, matching materials and mediums as closely as modern can duplicate old, and employing identical stitchery. The mending, whether done by an expert or an amateur, is one to command the best skill of the worker. The first step in such repairing is to cut from similar foundation textile a square or rectangular piece considerably larger than the rent. Position and baste this beneath the torn or badly worn place. If the mending is to be done on counted threads, the weave must match thread with thread and mesh with mesh. Otherwise, the new stitches will be askew. Turn the rug right side up. Cut away frayed edges and badly worn portions straight with the foundation weave. Overcast the old textile to the new with the precision described. It is to be expected that the portion of the rug about the hole will be tender. To strengthen it, and also to secure the patch adequately to the rug, embroider over 3 or possibly 4 rows of the double thickness, stitchery and all. The yarn will probably be so worn that it will act as a slight padding merely. The new embroidery medium must match the old in tone and in kind, and carry out the fragment of design that is missing. This stitchery will entirely conceal the patch on the right side. On the wrong side, cut away the superfluous patching textile and fell down what is left close to the newly inserted embroidery stitches. The patch will be as invisible as fine mending can make it. Since the embroidery is done through overlapping foundations, the patch will be firm. The patch should be pressed by covering with a damp cloth laid over the wrong side and ironing with a fairly hot iron. It is advisable to press the entire rug in like manner at the same time. If the section of the design to be duplicated does not appear in any other part of the rug, it is important before any repairing whatsoever is done to take off on drafting paper as clear a pattern as the worn stitchery permits. The work is not difficult, as it progresses in well-defined rows as in cross-stitch. When the design has been designated on the paper, colors can be painted in. Whatever the type of rug worked by counted stitches, this method should be followed. Hooked rugs are similarly repaired, although the lack of precision in the stitchery permits far more latitude. Designs are seldom taken off. The patch is positioned according to the weave. This is all that is necessary. Threads do not have to match exactly. The portion of the pattern to be replaced is hooked in as accurately as the skill of the rug maker permits. In rare occasions, when there is a large hole, outlines of design are sketched on the patch with charcoal or a soft pencil. Unless the rent is very bad, the rug does not have to be put back into the frame when it is mended. Before starting to hook, all frayed portions of the old rug about the rent should be cut away, and edges of old foundation felled to the patch. It is often wise to rip out some rows of stitches about the hole and set the new stitchery through both layers of the foundation, affixing them firmly and invisibly together. This allows for a neater finish on the wrong side. As soon as the edge of a rug begins to show signs of wear, it should be strengthened by binding with braid or tape of diagonal weave. Fell the binding down neatly. When but one row of hooking is frayed, it can be ripped out, the foundation turned back to the second row, and the edge freshly bound. Hooked rugs that have badly torn borders can have them replaced with new. Baste one side of a strip of burlap to the firm underside of the foundation. Both edges of the burlap should be overcast. The strip should be several inches wide, so that it will extend at least 2 inches beyond the rug edge when positioned. Join strips together by overlapping 1 inch and tack with coarse stitches. This method of positioning strips is used when rugs are square or rectangular. If rugs are round or oval, position each strip separately so that the new textile will match the direction of the weave in the rug foundation. Strips may need to be cut wider than for the other shaped rugs, and they should be shorter. When positioned, edges, not ends, will overlap. The applied textile will present a curious appearance, suggestive of steps along the edge. After the hooking is completed, these jagged parts are cut off, leaving the edge conforming to the contour of the rug. It is then turned back and bound. Although it might seem easier to set a bias strip around a round rug, this should never be done. It will either cup or ripple, while the straight one will not. Fabric mosaic, button rugs, and petal, scalloped mats present no difficulties in repairing. Foundations are patched with materials to match. New units, cut like the old and of corresponding color, are sewed to them. The lining, where ripped, is sewed in place, or the entire rug is relined if needed. A rug with foundation partly exposed should be so patched that the lines where old and new textiles join are well concealed. In a quilted rug, the seaming should come on the line of indented stitchery, which will hide it. In patchwork rugs, the ornamental applique can be ripped and then felled down again over the portion of the patch inserted beneath. Where this method of concealment cannot be carried out, stitches of embroidery can be worked over seams, provided the worker has cut the shape of the patch with this purpose in mind. This is assuming that embroidery is combined with applique, as so often happens, or that it can be introduced not only where needed, but in occasional other places, making it seem to be part of the original plan of design. Embroidered rugs can have decorative stitchery conceal seams as if ornament merely were its reason. A rent can be so deftly mended thus, when old and new materials match perfectly in kind and color, that it is practically invisible. Frayed embroidery can be picked out and done again in new medium, or worked over as if it were padding. Broken threads of quilting stitchery should be ended off securely, and new run in where old is missing, so that the design is preserved. A braided rug frayed at the edge can have one row ripped off and not replaced, or a new one can be substituted. Dilapidated braid in the field of a rug can be ripped and cut out, new strands sewed to remaining stout strands, the braiding continued to fill the vacant space, and the new length be sewed in place. This mending must be completed row by row to be imperceptible. In needle-woven rugs, should a single strand of weft give way, sew the disconnected ends to a joining weft and spread the weave enough to fill any empty space. New weft can be woven in to fill a rent left threadbare. If the warp breaks, the Homecraft rug maker must be a skillful worker to mend it correctly. It may be necessary to call in an expert. New warp will be required. This must be tied to the old where it is strong and be pulled as taut as the other warp. Then new weft must be interlaced to fill the space. If side edges need repairing, they can be strengthened by working over with buttonhole stitch, using colors to match the worked over weft. Worn ends of rugs can be bound, or commercial rug fringe replace the original. There is a double heading to such fringe, between the layers of which the rug is slipped and sewed. Knit rugs, since they are made in strips or sections seamed together, are easily repaired by the simple process of knitting and inserting new portions to replace those worn out. If part of a section only needs replacing, slip the loops of stitches in the nearest strong row onto a knitting needle and knit a length of new medium matching the old. Bind off the stitches when a sufficient length to fill the space is done. Graft this edge to the one it is made to fit, or seam the two edges together if one is not familiar with the process of grafting. Rents in crocheted rugs can be mended row by row. Join the new medium to the old where it is strong, and crochet to complete the part of the row to be filled in. Fasten off all ends securely. Complete each row thus, working back and forth or from right to left only, according to the stitchery in the rug. When made in sections, a crocheted rug is easily repaired by replacing old parts with new. Edges can be renewed by raveling frayed stitchery and crocheting fresh. Rugs ornamented with pigments can be retouched with whatever coloring agent was used originally. If the foundation is as good as new, an entirely different color scheme can be carried out as successfully as at first, provided darker tones are used. In turning to the subject of cleaning as an essential part of the care of rugs, two processes are found, one mechanical, the other handwork. Each has its adherents. Mechanical vacuum cleaners simplify the task. By them, moths are eliminated as well as dirt. Too constant use of high-pressure machines should be guarded against, and a careful choice of correct attachments be made to accord with the type of rug being processed. Otherwise, the cleaning may wear stitchery, though such risks are reputed to have been eliminated by improved mechanism. Rugs wiped off with a damp cloth after cleaning have their color freshened. After a rug is well cleaned by whatever process, it can be kept clean for a long time by going over it daily with a damp cloth. Smooth face rugs, hand cleansed, should be laid on the grass and be beaten, first on the wrong and then on the right side using a flexible woven rug beater. If the rug is of a coarse type, such as a carpet rug, it can then be swept with a regular corn broom. If it is one of choice work, it can be swept on the wrong side with a broom. On the right, it should be brushed with a clothes brush having fairly stiff bristles, and then be wiped off with a damp cloth. For these last two treatments, a rug can be laid on a table covered with newspapers. This prevents the worker having to bend far over. There are certain types of rugs that should never be swept with a corn broom. They should be beaten, but not too vigorously, and then gone over with a clothes brush, not a whisk, and wiped with a damp cloth afterwards. The quilted rug and fine embroidered rugs belong to this class. A flexible whisk is advised for the right side of mosaic and petal rugs, and those having applied or slightly embossed surfaces. Rugs with a pile should be beaten, swept, and wiped off as described. Like the better sort of smooth face rugs, fine piles should be brushed on the right side with a flexible whisk or a clothes brush. Suit the utensil to the character of the work in the specific floor covering. Always sweep or brush a pile rug either with the nap or across it, never against the nap. Brushing with the nap heightens the sheen and assists felting. Cleansing a rug against the nap impairs the sheen and separates filaments. It opens the way for dust to settle on foundations instead of forming a barrier against it, as when the nap is correctly smoothed. When wiping off rugs of all types, add a very little alcohol or a few drops of household ammonia to the clear, lukewarm water, and the surface will not only be free from all traces of dust, but colors will be heightened also. When colors are known to be fast and textiles are suitable, rugs can be washed. In olden times, all cloth that was used in rag rugs was first washed, and that likely to run was soaked until no more color would come out. This treatment is recommended today when cloth is from discarded garments, or when colors need to be set. In modern rag rugs employing new textiles, such laundering is generally omitted. The finish of new goods helps to keep them clean. Dyes are more reliable. For laundry purposes, a lukewarm solution of soap bark and water is an old standby. Today, there are numerous excellent cleaning agents. An ordinary scrubbing brush with flexible bristles can be used on most rug surfaces, or a hand-manipulated suction or vacuum washer. The vigor of the treatment should be regulated to suit the textile and type of rug. After thorough rinsing, lay rugs flat on the grass or on boards or cement either outdoors or in. It is customary to dry Oriental rugs in strong sunlight after a hose has been played on them as a rinsing process. Water is expunged by pressing with a round wooden roller run over the surface following the direction of the nap. This method is recommended for washable Homecraft rugs which have been rinsed in several waters. A portiere pole or a large rolling pin can supply the tool. Never wring a rug. The twisting and creasing is ruinous. Rugs should never be hung on a line to dry after washing, or when they are cleaned by any process or even aired. The strain on the stitchery, especially that close to the line, is tremendous in heavy rugs and too great in any floor covering. It separates rows of weft or warp according to the way they are hung, lengthwise or sideways. Stitches are loosened or made irregular. To beat a rug on a line exaggerates these troubles. Shaking rugs is invariably harmful. It makes threads snap. It strains both warp and weft. It loosens stitches, especially those held together by pressure merely, as in hooked rugs. It weakens binding and frays fringe. No floor covering can long withstand such drastic treatment. It has been found so injurious to Oriental rugs to shake them and hang them on lines that, according to G. Griffin Lewis, more of these splendid floor coverings are worn out by such mistreatment than by actual usage. Foundations break, knots loosen, untie, and eventually threads come out. This causes a blemish in itself and also weakens all the surrounding textile. Homecraft rugs, many of which are exquisite creations, deserve to be spared such a fate. The Oriental method of straightening rugs is excellent for all handmade floor coverings, discovered to be crooked when completed. Tack the rug to a floor, pulling it straight as the tacks are put in. The line in the flooring where the boards join will supply a gauge along both sides. Ends must be at perfect right angles to them. Wet the rug thoroughly and allow it to dry before releasing from its position, whence it will emerge straight and even. Rug corners that have a tendency to curl can be kept flat by either of two methods. A narrow strip of lead, 1/8 inch thick and 2 or 3 inches long, encased in cloth, may be sewed close to the lengthwise edge at the corner of the rug on the underside, or triangles of rubber may be basted or otherwise secured to the underside of the rug corners. One rubber stair pad will supply 4 such triangular corner sections. The wear on rugs laid directly on hardwood floors has been proven so destructive that there is a growing tendency to use rug linings. All power loom carpets, properly laid, are so protected, but until comparatively recently, no such precautions were taken to spare handmade rugs, however handsome. The growth of appreciation and value of the latter in the Occident is responsible for the present better care. Felt and rubber are excellent for linings. They can be bought in rug sizes or cut to order. Their tenacious quality helps to keep rugs from sliding on polished floors, as well as softening the tread and preserving the rugs. Lining paper, like felt and rubber, has good resilience, but it lacks tenacity. It should be used under carpet-size rugs only, not scatter rugs. No lining should be so bulky that it perceptibly raises a rug from the floor. In the Orient, where the care of rugs, as well as the making of them, is understood thoroughly, entire floors are not infrequently covered with very heavy felt. This serves as a soft and neutral background, enhancing the beauty of rugs and preserving the textiles. In the Occident, carpets are sometimes so used. Their vogue for this purpose is steadily increasing. It need scarcely be mentioned that rugs should never be placed on figured carpets. The conflict of patterns is confusing. Carpets in flat, neutral tones, especially those having a deep pile, make appropriate backgrounds, artistic and luxuriously soft. Fine rugs will last generations when they are given the care recommended. But even when they pass beyond use in their original form, their day may not be over entirely. Should the rug be too tender throughout to endure the hard wear it would get on a floor, it can be converted into a table rug or table carpet, as such covers were called in olden times. Some types of rugs make attractive wall hangings, another ancient use. The good portions of otherwise worn-out rugs can be salvaged by cutting them out and putting them to use as centers for braided, crocheted, knit, or hooked rugs, etc. The reconstruction of floor coverings in this manner depends for its success upon the correct combination of two congenial crafts, or the skillful introduction of an inset piece into a surround of like craft. Pieces from rugs can be bound and used for chair seats and foot mats, or as covers for sofa pillows, footstools, or floor cushions. Before the time comes, however, when rugs are so badly worn that such salvaging must be resorted to, every effort should be made to keep them intact as floor coverings. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24 of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historical Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Joanne Turner. Business aspects of rug making. The rug maker who wishes to sell the floor coverings she makes can find a market for them if she goes about it in a business-like way. She can sell her rugs outright to a store or department handling carpets, getting a wholesale price from the buyers, or through a store, gift shop, or exchange on a commission basis. She can also sell direct to a clientele of her own. In the latter case, she can use some room in her home for display purposes, or have her own shop, disposing of the rugs in connection with other varieties of handicraft, antiques, or gifts. It is also possible to build up a mail order business by sending out form letters to a selected mailing list, or by advertising through papers and periodicals whose readers are known to be interested in handicraft in connection with interior decoration. Selling rugs in this way requires photographs of rugs or drawings of designs to be sent on request to prospective purchasers. The colors to be used in carrying out patterns may be left to the patron to determine, or they may be suggested by the rug maker. In presenting patterns, those carried out in wash drawings are most attractive, even though the colors finally decided upon for the rugs are quite different. It frequently happens that the interest of some interior decorator is gained after examining samples of a rug maker's work, and he or she will take orders from clients and hand the orders over to the rug maker to execute on a commission basis. Special order work is the most desirable of any. A rug maker who is also a designer and acquainted with the distribution of colors to secure proper balance in carpets can turn this knowledge to advantage by giving lessons in rug craft. She should be able to retail equipment and materials bought at wholesale, thereby adding to her profits by thus being in the trade. A teacher must be a thorough technician, either in some special craft or in many. She must be able to impart her knowledge and to correct mistakes easily in a beginner's work. A rug maker, particularly one familiar with many crafts, is often in demand for occupational therapy, in which work rugcraft holds a high place, ranking among the very first in importance. It may be mentioned in this connection that the value of rug making cannot always be estimated in dollars and cents. Its restorative work to the worker has been found incalculable. Men and women whose vocations keep their brains under constant mental pressure find the avocation of rugcraft a relief and a pleasure. It is absorbing without being exhausting. The stimulant it offers brings into play manual energy and artistic ability. Such men as bank presidents in metropolitan cities have taken up rug making as a hobby, finding in it an invigorating diversion with recuperative results. A rug maker who would gain monetary success through her craftsmanship must have something distinctive to offer. This may consist in superiority of technique in conjunction with fine designs and pleasing color arrangements, or it may come through individuality in designs of her own invention, wrought with due consideration to color and its proper balance. Or it may come through charm of color combinations, creating anew the beauty of classic old designs. Or it may come through some novel assembling of types of work or different crafts that she discovers can be united artistically. Or, still again, it may be through advanced showings of ancient rug crafts in revival. It is essential that rugs offered for sale be fine examples of some incoming style, rugs that are on the crest of a wave of popularity, or conservative examples of staple types. Craftsmanship must be above the mediocre. When once a good connection has been established for disposing of one's output, the store, shop, or exchange will, upon request, advise the rug maker of types of design and possibly of color schemes that especially appeal to its clientele. The rug maker who wishes to confine her business to the sale of only those rugs that she herself makes has the 4 avenues of outlet already named. If she sells to personal friends and acquaintances, they will be sporadic customers and should not be considered as more. There are rug makers who are kept constantly busy selling their floor coverings in the several ways given and who make neat little sums thereby. As in other enterprises, success comes through persistent effort coupled with the knowledge that articles have actual merit. Some rug makers have no desire to be anything but fine craftsmen. They prefer to work on a wage earning plan under the direction of some society or community enterprise. They receive a steady rate, generally calculated as so much per hour, though it may be a flat rate of so much for a rug. Or again, the calculations may be at the rate of some set price per square foot. When a number of women in a community wish to turn their rug-making abilities into profitable channels, they can cooperate and arrange for a sale at the home of some one of the group. For this sale, each person makes several rugs to be sold outright or from which orders are taken, to be developed according to the customer's preferences as to colors and mediums. A combination of both these methods is recommended, whereby rugs, though sold, are not delivered until the end of the sale, thus making it possible for orders to be taken from the rugs rather than from designs. At stated times, sales of this sort should be held. They prosper business by keeping alive the interest awakened, as well as furthering orders. Each person making a sale should note the address of the purchaser in order to send announcements of following sales. It is advisable to have a register conspicuously placed on a table with pen and ink at hand, and a card plainly lettered suspended above. This states that all those whose names and addresses are written down will receive information of forthcoming sales and any special rug news. Between sales, rug makers fill orders and make a fresh supply of rugs for future sales. The latter floor coverings should be in new designs, and even in different crafts if workers have sufficient versatility. Except for periods when sales are carried on, this business does not take women from their homes, an aspect which, to some rug makers, is a matter of importance. A rug shop is a natural outgrowth of such a community undertaking. It reverts to the benefit of all workers. A clientele will have been established and the necessary avenues of supply assured. Each worker contributes toward running expenses, or one of the group may decide on her own initiative to start a shop. In the first instance, there must be a person in charge who gets a salary paid by the contributors as part of their overhead expenses. Each rug maker receives the full amount of the sale price for her floor covering. It is from this that she pays her proportion of costs. Risks are divided. In the second instance, no one is at any expense except the person running the shop, who takes all risks. It is her prerogative to make a selection of rugs for display purposes or for stock in trade, and to determine the commission rate. 33 1/3% is not uncommon in cities where rents and overhead are high. A fair average is 25% for specialty shops. Most regular stores ask but 20% for handling. Some ask 10, but these are run chiefly for the benefit of consignors, without profit to the concern being expected. The consignor must take into consideration the deduction of whatever commission is stated and ask such a selling price as will permit an adequate sum to come to her afterwards. The rug maker who establishes even a small business soon learns the sort of rug she should carry. It is important to have good rooms in which to show them and an attractive sign to lure the passerby to come in and examine the stock. Ingenuity is exhibited in many such signs, and artistry also. The woman who is starting out in the business often attracts attention to her rugs by hanging some over a porch rail, above which is a sign announcing "Rugs for Sale." When the house is on a main road in the country or in some village and motorists are constantly passing it, such a sign, though costing practically nothing, is often sufficient invitation. The rug should be specially chosen to attract the eye as well as indicate good taste. If the person running the shop really knows rugs, she can interest those who come in by telling them about designs, types of rugs, and their suitability to definite rooms in a home or certain styles of decoration. She can attract attention to fineness in stitchery and peculiarities of work, and thus hold attention and inspire confidence. Knowledge, or its lack, is soon perceived by purchasers, and if a connoisseur or rug collector comes, consternation ensues or delight, according to the personnel of the shop. A rug maker, even though not connected with a shop, should have a knowledge of the worth of her floor coverings. She cannot otherwise set correct selling prices on them. Fortunately, there are ways of gaining the desired information, thereby avoiding two common pitfalls. One, an exaggerated valuation of her own handicraft, which results in exorbitant prices. The other, undervaluation, which suggests the work is not up to standard and cannot command a sum commensurate with that of fine rug craft. One avenue of gaining information without outlay is the pricing of rugs of similar character and quality that are on sale at the time. Note the fineness of stitchery and quality of mediums and materials. These are important factors and must be given due consideration. It is not enough that rugs are of like size and in identical craft. These are but two of the many points influencing values. Stitchery and finish must come up to a high standard. The chairman of the board, passing on all work sent for admission to one of the notable handicraft societies of America, told me that from his experience, more rugs were refused acceptance because of badly finished edges than for any other one special defect. This indicates the care with which work is gone over by craft societies and examined by buyers for stores. One other instance of such care may be cited. An expert craftsman specializing in woven rugs told me that the first rugs she tried to sell were all returned to her because the grade of warp was poor. The firm that sold the warp, when informed of the matter, looked well into their end of it and discovered the fault lay with them. They rewarped her loom gratis, doing all they could to make amends. She, of course, lost heavily, notwithstanding, but she learned about warps from this experience. These illustrations are illuminating and should act as helpful warnings to any rug maker who is inclined to slight any item whatsoever in her work. Thereby, the rugs may be unsaleable. It must also be borne in mind that age in itself influences prices. An old rug will bring more than a modern one, even though in all other respects the latter is equal to and sometimes better than the antique. The modern rug sells on its intrinsic merits alone. The antique sells on this plus an arbitrary sum estimated by years. The rug maker must reckon with this, not with any discouragement, but knowing it to be a factor regulating values. Therefore, in pricing rugs with the view of appraising her own, she must use modern rugs as the criterion. This situation of relative values of antique and modern pieces pertains throughout household furnishings such as furniture, glass, silver, etc., as well as floor coverings that are handmade. Craftsmen in all lines have to contend with this factor. The rug maker is no exception. The sum set upon completed rugs shown in embroidery shops, where rug equipments and materials only are for sale and not floor coverings as such, cannot be considered as criterions of price. The rugs are not exhibited to attract sales for them, but as illustrative examples of stitchery, color combinations, etc., that result from making rugs with the outfits that are there procurable. When a Homecraft rug maker has studied the market in the ways described, giving careful thought to each factor, she will have a very good idea of the value of her own work. Experience in disposing of her rugs will add to her knowledge. Another method of ascertaining valuations of rugs is to have them appraised by an authorized appraiser well acquainted with rugs and whose business it is to know values. A good way to get in touch with such a person is to inquire at some rug store of high standing. There may be in its employ an appraiser who can evaluate other types of handmade rugs besides Oriental carpets. If not, the address of such an individual should be obtainable. A handicraft shop that sells rugs supplies another means of getting work appraised. Some remuneration should be offered for such expert advice. It is enlightening to realize that all the ways described for profitable ventures have been successfully used at one time or another. Some require capital, others none apart from equipments and materials. The idea of community centers for rug making has been tried out in many instances, with more or less success, as already instanced in the Abnaki and Sabados rug enterprises. A third notable one was organized and promoted by Mrs. Candace Wheeler. Today, there are scattered over America many communities of rug makers working under the leadership of some expert or the direction of societies for the promotion of needlecraft. Some of these centers are in the southern mountains, where, among other types, Shuck mats are featured. Centers in Canada and New England are apt to feature hooked rugs. In England, needlecraft societies of royal patronage are making faithful reproductions of ancient needlepoint carpets. The reappearance of turkey work carpets and other canvas embroidered floor coverings in America and England shows a distinct trend toward the finest types. In all these crafts and enterprises, rug makers are earning money. End of chapter 24. End of Homecraft Rugs, Their Historic Background, Romance of Stitchery, and Method of Making by Lydia LeBaron Walker.